Chapter 39-29. Lin Ge's sudden change left Baldwin dumbfounded. He didn't expect this guy to change so quickly. Just now, he looked like he was going to break up with him, and now, he looked like nothing had happened. His face changed faster than flipping the pages of a book. This kind of personality was very much in line with the character of the rich second generation of Huaxia. Because they were rich, they were unscrupulous. Mr. Baldwin, I heard that the place you found is very good. Introduce it to me. Lin Gu smiled and looked around the restaurant. Baldwin didn't have much interest in these things. It was all arranged by Natasha. Baldwin didn't have time to think about trivial things. He glanced at Natasha, and Natasha understood what he meant. New York is a city that hides all kinds of delicious Japanese cuisine. There are not only cheap and friendly izakaya, but also the world's top high-grade Japanese food. Natasha said, the branch of high-grade Japanese food, omakase, is particularly popular. After experiencing it once, you will definitely be moved by the wonderful moment of sushi dancing in your mouth. It sounds very good, but you have to know that I am from Huaxia. Lin Gu said, do you know how many delicacies there are in Huaxia? It is not easy for a Japanese sushi to move me. Huaxia's delicacies are amazing. Natasha smiled slightly. Of course, I know about Huaxia's delicacies. I also like Huaxia's dishes very much. Even if they are not delicacies, they are very delicious. Have you eaten Huaxia's dishes? What do you like to eat? Lin Gu said, you are not talking nonsense to fool me, are you? Huaxia's tomato scrambled eggs, kung pao chicken, braised pork ribs, poached fish, twice-cooked pork, stir-fry potato, and dumplings with various fillings. I like them very much. Natasha said. Lin Gu was taken aback. Not bad. You know quite a lot. Of course. Natasha said, if I didn't know enough about food, the boss wouldn't have asked me to arrange a place for us to eat. Then what's so great about this Japanese restaurant? Lin Gu said, maybe the taste here is not even as good as kung pao chicken. This is the only Japanese 3-star Michelin restaurant in New York. Natasha said, omakase means please in Japanese. It's the most high-end way of dining in Japanese. Lin Gu said, I've heard of it. The dishes don't have a menu. The chef decides the dishes and the price based on the freshness of the ingredients. Natasha continued to explain, all we need to do is to sit here and wait, watch as the delicious ingredients are born in the chef's hands, and enjoy the delicious surprises that are delivered to us one after another. It sounds pretty awesome. What's the specialty? Lin Gu looked like a rich man who could afford to eat anything. Sushi, kebabs, tempura, it's a feast. Natasha clapped her hands and told the staff in the restaurant to let the chef prepare the dishes. This is currently the most expensive restaurant in New York. Natasha smiled and said, our boss thinks that only by serving Mr. Carlos here can he show his sincerity. Lin Gu nodded and expressed his satisfaction. Natasha didn't want to be silent. She continued, the chef here was born in a fish market family and has been familiar with all kinds of fish since he was young. He followed his childhood dream and came to the U.S. At first, he ran a small Japanese restaurant in Beverly Hills. Then, he came to New York and opened this elegant restaurant. The restaurant's decor was unique and expensive. The chopping board, bar, and even the door were all flown in from Japan. 90% of the fresh ingredients here were flown in from Japan on the same day. In other words, the sashimi we eat at night was just caught from the pier during the day. This freshness ensures the taste of the sushi. Natasha said proudly. Su Yun asked, you're of Japanese descent, right? If she wasn't of mixed Japanese descent, there was no need to be proud of a Japanese dish. Natasha smiled and said, yes, my mother is Japanese. Then you don't look like a Japanese, Su Yun said. Japanese women are more petite. You don't have the characteristics of a Japanese woman at all. My father is of Russian and French descent, Natasha said. I inherited more of their bloodlines. Lin Gu said in an arrogant tone, looks like the Russians are not only suppressing the Japanese internationally, but they're also trying to intimidate the Japanese from the 4 northern islands. They're even suppressing the Japanese in terms of genetics. These taunts had no effect on Natasha, because she was an American in her bones. The US made people of other bloodlines have a strong sense of identity with the US. This was something that other countries couldn't do. Anyone who was born in the US and lived in the US wouldn't have any feelings for their ancestral country. In their eyes, only the US was their country. This was something that other countries couldn't learn. It was a situation caused by the environment. Soon, the chef started to arrange for the dishes to be served. 5 appetizers and more than 20 sushi dishes. It was an indescribable feeling. Su Yun and Lin Gu couldn't help but be impressed. After eating the sushi here, they felt that all the sushi they had eaten before was wasted. During the meal, Baldwin wanted to cut to the chase many times, but Lin Gu waved his hand every time to tell him not to try to enjoy the taste in his mouth. This Michelin 3-star restaurant was indeed a 3-star restaurant. It was worthy of being a place worth taking a plane to taste. However, if Su Yun and Lin Gu were to take a plane just for a meal, they definitely wouldn't do that. After all, taking a plane to give money to the Japanese would make them feel a little uncomfortable. But it was different with Baldwin treating them. They could eat as much as they could. It wasn't their money anyway. When they were almost done eating, Baldwin spoke again. "Carlos, regarding your father, I'm sorry that I couldn't help much." "What does that have to do with you?" "If someone wanted to kill him, I couldn't stop it even if I was right in front of him," Lin Gu said. "It's useless even if you were there. No one could help him. That's a disaster that he can't avoid." Baldwin saw that he was very open-minded and didn't continue the topic. "I hope that our cooperation can be better than my cooperation with your father." "Of course. As long as Mr. Baldwin can show enough sincerity, I can give you enough in return." Lin Gu said, "Mr. Baldwin, you didn't plan to meet me in person before. You must think that once my father is dead, I'm worthless, right?" Baldwin was silent for a moment and didn't admit it. "Of course, I don't think so. Whether you admit it or not, it doesn't matter to me." Lin Gu waved his hand and said, "Whether or not I can become a person like my father, this will definitely take time to prove. In addition, I want to tell you that I don't want to become a person like my father. I think that he is sometimes too conservative in the way he does things." Rumors are not conservative at all, Baldwin thought. At this time, he felt that the Carlos in front of him didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Young people are young people. They don't know what trouble is until they have experienced setbacks. "I do things more boldly than my father. You can rest assured, Mr. Baldwin." Lin Gu continued, "We will have more cooperation in the future as long as you value me enough and treat me as a real partner, not a useless son by my father's side." Baldwin just smiled. "It seems that Mr. Baldwin doesn't trust me very much." Lin Gu smiled. "I know that there are many Hua Xia people who want to cooperate with you, but I will be the most unforgettable one among them." Hearing this, Baldwin couldn't help but shake his head. "Carlos, do you know who is working with me now? You are still too young to say this." "How would I know? You tell me. I want to see how big the gap is between me and them." Lin Gu glared. "Ha ha ha, this is not following the rules." Baldwin smiled. He could see Lin Gu's naivety, so he was very happy. "Keeping the client's secret is the principle of our line of work. It is because I have done this well that your father, Mr. Chuan Shan, has been willing to work with me. If I had casually leaked the information to others, your father would not have worked with me." Lin Gu snorted. "I don't care. You can tell anyone about me. Do they have the ability to deal with me?" Baldwin suddenly thought of an idiom, arrogant fool. Chapter 39:30. Baldwin said coolly, "Actually, I think that young people should learn more and know more about themselves." "What do you mean by that?" "Mr. Baldwin, do you think that by coming here today, I will give you face and acknowledge your cooperation? So, you have the right to educate me?" Lin Gu said, "Although I am not a smart person, it is not up to others to educate me. After today, No one in New York will dare to take on your business except me. Baldwin could no longer tolerate Lin Ge's domineering attitude. His attitude became more forceful. I admit, I did not expect Mr. Baldwin to be able to settle the matter in such a short time. You are amazing. I admire you for that. Lin Gu said, if not for Mr. Baldwin's ability, I would not have come here to meet you today. Courtney could not help but say, Mr. Carlos, please show some respect. Our boss has always been very polite to you. I am talking to Mr. Baldwin. Do you have the right to interrupt? Have you figured out who you are? Lin Gu said, how many people in New York would dare to kill you for a little money? Haven't you felt it yourself? Courtney's temper dissipated after hearing Lin Ge's words. As a person, figure out your status and position. Lin Gu said, I said before that my business was to be discussed with Mr. Baldwin. You said that you could replace him, but what happened? Did you replace him? In the end, weren't you chased like a stray dog and ran away with your tail between your legs? You. Courtney clenched his fists. He really wanted to cut his neck with a knife. He swore that if this guy lost his value in cooperating with Baldwin one day, he would find him and kill him with his own hands. This time, he was like a stray dog in New York. It was all thanks to him. What about me? Did I say something wrong? If Mr. Baldwin had not come, don't you know what would have happened to you? Lin Gu said, if I can make you miserable once, I can make you miserable a second time. Don't think that I am joking. I will do what I say. Are you threatening me? Courtney's expression changed. Lin Gu nodded and said domineeringly, yes, I am threatening you. What, do you want to slit my throat here? You don't have a tank by your side. It's dangerous for you to be so arrogant. Courtney's background meant that he would not tolerate being looked down upon. Courtney. Carlos is my guest. How can you say that? Baldwin said with a sullen face. He didn't want Carlos to die yet. This was a money tree, and it might even be a super big money tree. Courtney's threat was clearly detrimental to Baldwin's interests. How could Baldwin be happy about this? Even if Courtney was trying to give him face, he still had to reprimand him and stop him from continuing. I'm sorry, boss. Courtney immediately nodded and admitted his mistake. Then, he respectfully said to Lin Gu, Mr. Carlos, my attitude just now was problematic. Everything you said is correct. I hope my words didn't upset you. Please forgive me. A dog is a dog. Lin Gu ignored Courtney and said to Baldwin, Mr. Baldwin, you're really good at training dogs. You can make a dog so obedient. When will you teach me how to train a dog? Baldwin ignored Lin Ge's words for the sake of his subordinate's face. However, Lin Gu didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. He wanted to portray a legend and even a domineering second-generation rich kid. I heard that New York is very chaotic, much more so than Los Angeles. I'm afraid having a tank isn't enough. I also want to raise a few dogs like Mr. Baldwin. Courtney's type is very good. He's loyal and obedient. Are there any more dogs like him? Mr. Baldwin, can you recommend one to me? He directly described Courtney as a dog. There probably wasn't another person in New York who would dare to say such a thing, right? If there was another person in New York, Courtney's 2 years in New York would have been wasted. Carlos, you must be joking, Baldwin said. Baldwin said, Courtney is my right-hand man, my right-hand man. I brought him all the way from Colombia to New York. He's different from the others. Lin Gu looked at Courtney provocatively. Then you'll have to bear the pain and give him to me. You have so many dogs. You can just transfer a few from Colombian. Carlos, it's best if we don't continue this topic, right? I don't like people looking at my subordinates like that, Baldwin said. If we want to cooperate, then let's talk about cooperation. Lin Gu ignored him. Okay, if you want to talk about cooperation, then we'll talk about cooperation. Courtney finally swallowed his anger. Lin Gu was provoking this guy like this. It was obvious that he wanted to draw hatred for himself. Sooner or later, a fight would break out. Lin Gu was doing this to attract the dangerous firepower to himself. Su Yun and Lin Gu both knew that Courtney's blade was very fast. A sudden attack would be a threat to anyone. That was why Lin Gu deliberately drew Courtney's hatred to himself. That way, once the two sides had a falling out or realized something was wrong, Su Yun would be less of a threat. When the time came, Su Yun would definitely be the target of the enemy's firepower. What Lin Gu could do was to share Courtney's threat to Su Yun. The more he made Courtney feel bad, the more Courtney would hate him. When the time came for a falling out, Courtney's threat would be focused on Lin Gu. Su Yun could see all that Lin Gu was doing. He felt very comforted. He was comforted by the fact that this kid was so considerate of him. The fee is 10%. We'll solve all the problems in one go, Lin Gu said. I don't have any other requests. The cost is really fluctuating. Baldwin smiled. In the past, we were the ones who set the fee. Now, you've taken the initiative. Young people really do have the demeanor of young people. Lin Gu grinned. Mr. Baldwin, let alone 35%, even if it was 55%, I would still dare to shout it out. That's too much of a loss, Baldwin said. Just because I shouted it out doesn't mean I'll lose money. It's just shouting. There's no actual transaction. Lin Gu said. In any case, you, Mr. Baldwin, won't let my transaction happen. So, I won't lose a single cent, don't you think so? Baldwin was stunned. This was the wisdom of Huaxia people. There are many small merchants and peddlers in Huaxia. They all say that they're losing money by shouting. Lin Gu said, no one will lose money. At most, they'll lose money by shouting. Losing money by shouting is the real deal. Baldwin had to admit that he had underestimated the other party's ability. From the beginning, this guy didn't really want to lose money. Instead, he led the situation from the beginning. So much so that Baldwin thought that he had control of the situation. In the end, everything was still in the hands of the other party. To have such a big vision at such a young age, he was not simple. He was really not simple. Baldwin realized that Natasha was right. If he couldn't use such a person, he would definitely become a problem. Carlos, I really admire you. I hope that we can be friends in the future. Good friends who can conquer anything, Baldwin said. To have a friend like me in New York, I guarantee that you won't regret it. I can swear on this. Lin Gu smiled. Mr. Baldwin, I know very well what kind of country the United States is. It's a country where those with capital are the lords. Even if I don't have any relationship with you, as long as I have enough money, everyone will look up to me. It doesn't matter if I know you or not. Baldwin laughed and thought to himself, this kid's words are really annoying. However, behind this kind of arrogance, as long as there was real ability, it didn't matter. He didn't care at all. As long as Carlos didn't make an enemy of him, he would treat him as a friend. There was no harm to him. Why not? As long as you're happy. You can think whatever you want. Ha ha ha. So, our cooperation today is settled? Baldwin asked with a smile. Then, when do we start operating? Chapter 39-31. Of course, I can do that at any time. The money from all the assets I sold in Los Angeles has been credited to my account. Lin Gu said, it's just that Mr. Baldwin didn't want to see me for a long time. Is there any other reason? What reason can I have? Baldwin was a little puzzled. If you were willing to trust my people, our cooperation would have started long ago. Mr. Baldwin, don't blame me. For now, I'm not in a hurry. I'm really not in a hurry. Lin Gu said, this money isn't from Huaxia. It doesn't make any difference whether you transfer it a day earlier or a day later. Baldwin said, I'm sorry about your father's death, but I have to remind you again that Huaxia will definitely be involved in your father's death. Once Huaxia is involved in this matter, it will be a little troublesome. Huaxia's relevant departments may trace it to Los Angeles. By then, it may be a little too late for you to transfer the money, right? Lin Gu shook his head and said the truth. You also know that Huaxia has a department called Relevant Departments. You can rest assured that this relevant department is basically a department that doesn't do practical things. What it does is to take over and take the blame. If there is no place to shirk the responsibility, then the relevant departments will be mentioned. So, anything that is handed over to the relevant departments is basically a failure. Baldwin couldn't understand what Lin Gu was saying. He couldn't help but frown and look at Natasha. He needed Natasha to explain it to him. Natasha smiled. Boss, the relevant departments that Mr. Carlos mentioned are not just one department. In Huaxia, if it's only handed over to the Public Security Department, it means that it's handed over to the Public Security Department. If it's only handed over to the Political and Law Department, it also means that it's the Political and Law Department. Once it's said that it's a relevant department, it may involve all the departments involved in this matter to solve this problem together. Doesn't that mean that the relevant departments are more powerful? Baldwin said in surprise, if this is handed over to the relevant departments to investigate, the problem will be solved faster, and the fact that Chuanshan's money was transferred to Los Angeles will be found faster. I'm right. However, Natasha shook her head. Although there are connections between the various departments in Huaxia, the most inconceivable thing is that once the relevant departments are involved, they need to coordinate and cooperate with each other. However, the various departments like to give in to each other. What's there to be modest about? Baldwin was even more perplexed. Natasha shook her head. That was all she could explain. She couldn't understand the deeper things that were beyond her comprehension. Mutual humility? What a nice way to put it. Lin Gu smiled. This is called kicking the ball in China. Baldwin felt like laughing. Kicking the ball around? Huaxia still has the nerve to talk about kicking the ball around? They were beaten 2-0 by Uzbekistan and did not score a goal against Qatar. Recently, other than getting a 1-0 score from Korea, which was something to be proud of, they were then beaten 1-0 by Iran, a country that had been at war for many years. Huaxia still has the nerve to talk about kicking the ball around? Lin Gu seemed to read Baldwin's mind from his expression. Let me tell you, Mr. Baldwin. Don't look down on our Huaxia's ability to kick the ball around. Yes, I admit that Huaxia can't play football, but when it comes to kicking the ball around, we are one of the best in the world. Lin Gu said with a bit of self-deprecation and self-deprecation. There was nothing to be proud of. If it weren't for the requirements of the current mission, Lin Gu would be too embarrassed to point out the trivial matters in the system. You did beat Korea, but you lost more than you won. I'm afraid there's nothing to brag about, right? Courtney sneered from the side. In a great country with more than 1 billion people, you can't even find a dozen people who can play football. And you still have the nerve to say that the ability to kick the ball around is one of the best in the world? What's the difference between kicking the ball around and football? Lin Gu glared at Courtney. There's a big difference. I'd like to hear the details. Baldwin also smiled. Huaxia's football is so bad because of the system. It's because of the group of dogs who control Huaxia's football. Growth requires money. If you don't play football, you can't survive. Lin Gu said, if any country has such a group of trash controlling football, it's impossible for football to grow. The other party was silent. Also, let me tell you, the kicking the ball around has nothing to do with football. It's just a metaphor, understand? Lin Gu said, if you can't even understand this, don't tell me you know so much about Huaxia's culture. Natasha was the first to react. I understand now. Mr. Carlos, what you mean by kicking the ball means to shirk responsibility and responsibility. You're still smart. Lin Gu glanced at Natasha. Many departments don't understand the responsibilities of their work. Every department is in charge of something, but they don't take full responsibility. Therefore, everyone is afraid of trouble. Because some work can be done by anyone, but it's hard work and unrewarding. Some people don't even understand what their responsibilities are. Anything that happened in society would involve many aspects. Once it involved many aspects, people would be afraid of taking responsibility. Although everyone understood the principle of taking responsibility bravely, once they took on many responsibilities, they would be doomed. It was better to turn big problems into small ones and nothing at all. Many things could be brushed aside by fooling around. If they could kick the ball around, they would kick it away. The more you do, the more mistakes you make. The less you do, the fewer mistakes you make. It's good not to do. These 3 golden words were the advice of many young Hua Xia wily old foxes who appreciated them when they first entered the workforce. It could be said that these 3 words had slowly spread more and more in Hua Xia since the establishment of the system. More and more people began to treat these 3 golden words as guiding lights on the road of their lives. Then, they were led astray by these guiding lights. You can rest assured that the relevant departments of Hua Xia won't be able to find Los Angeles in a short time. Lin Gu said. What he said was true. If Su Yun hadn't been involved in this matter, they wouldn't have found out so quickly. It could even be said that if the relevant departments were given 10 years, they wouldn't be able to implicate Baldwin based on the rumors. It was even more impossible to implicate the other greedy snakes of Hua Xia because of Baldwin. Natasha suddenly turned around and went out to answer a call. When she came back, she whispered a few words in Baldwin's ear. Although she lowered her voice as much as possible and tried to explain the matter as simply as possible, Su Yun still heard a few key words. Baldwin had a new business, and the person who wanted to do business with him must be someone from Hua Xia, because Su Yun heard the words, Mr. Helion. Helion came from the Han dynasty's surname Lu, which meant that he was connected to the heavens. At that time, the Xiongnu people often changed their surnames, which was different from the habits of the people in the Central Plains. Also, because their social structure was still backward, and the inheritance of power and property was not stable, the use of surnames was also unstable. This surname originated from the southern Xiongnu people and the Chefu tribe during the 16 kingdoms of eastern Jin. It was impossible for it to appear in a foreign country. Baldwin nodded, indicating to Natasha that he understood. Natasha continued to stand behind Baldwin. Mr. Baldwin, if you have something to do, go ahead and do it. Lin Gu said, even if you don't say it, I can guess that something big must have come knocking on your door. Otherwise, with such a capable assistant by your side, she could solve it for you. Haha, now that Mr. Baldwin is personally involved, the amount of money that needs to be laundered must be no less than the amount that I have. Baldwin and Natasha were both stunned, but they quickly pretended to be calm. It's not that kind of business. Baldwin smiled. It's not that kind of business? Lin Gu also smiled. So it turns out that Mr. Baldwin and Hua Xia do not only have business with money, but also involve other aspects of business? Baldwin denied it again. This is not business with Hua Xia. Carlos, you think too much. The business that I value the most now is you. Lin Gu shook his head and said, Mr. Baldwin, you are very dishonest. Although I have no right to ask about your business with others, I'm afraid it's not good for you to deceive me like this, right? Businessmen are all about sincerity. I don't know how you can tell that I'm deceiving you? Baldwin asked, puzzled. Chapter 39-32. Lin Gu smiled. Our ears are very good. The surname Helion doesn't exist outside of Hua Xia, right? Baldwin's expression once again revealed a look of surprise. He was clearly shocked by Lin Ji's hearing ability, but he still insisted. The world is so big, why can't anyone from other countries be called Mr. Helion? Su Yun then slowly said, the Helion family originated from the Xiongnu tribe in Hua Xia's history. Because the Xiongnu Chanyu took a Han woman as his wife, his descendants followed the Lu family. During the Eastern Han Dynasty and the Western Jin Dynasty, the leader of the Xiongnu tribe in the northern part of Hua Xia was called Lu Zhubei, the virtuous prince of the right. He was the son of Emperor Guangwu of Han, Lu Fu the sixth son Duliao General Lu Jinbo. Lu Jinbo was captured during the northern expedition to the Xiongnu and gave birth to Shirley. Shirley gave birth to Wuli, and Wuli gave birth to Zhubei. Even Lin Gu was stunned by these things, let alone Baldwin and the other Americans. During the Western Jin Dynasty, Lu Hu changed his surname to Chefu. During the 16 kingdoms of Eastern Jin Dynasty, Lu Hu's great-grandson, Lu Bobo, the leader of the Chefu tribe in the southern Xiongnu tribe, called himself the Heavenly King of Xia. He proudly called himself Yun He Liantian and changed his name to Helian Bobo. He established the famous Xia kingdom and chased after Lu Zubei to become the emperor. In the history of Hua Xia, it was known as Huxia. The descendants of the royal family used Helian as their surname, which was passed down from generation to generation. Su Yun explained the origin of the surname. Natasha and Courtney both looked at Su Yun with admiration. It was simply unbelievable. Both of them were the kind of people who could come up with a few stories about Huaxia's history and feel that they knew a lot about Huaxia's culture, especially Courtney. And Su Yun could actually trace the origin of a random surname. His erudition was truly amazing. I wonder if the Mr. Helian that Mr. Baldwin mentioned was not from Huaxia. Where is he from? Su Yun asked. If there is another surname other than Huaxia, then there are some historical reasons. It's worth researching. Baldwin was speechless. Mr. Baldwin, there's nothing to hide about this. What would happen if I knew? What would happen then? There's no loss for you. Lin Gu said, there's no point in hiding it from me. It's just for the sake of the guests. Natasha tried to explain, confidentiality is part of our job. It's precisely because we've done a good job of keeping secrets that I believe Mr. Carlos is more at ease with us. Lin Gu waved his hand and said disdainfully, this is actually meaningless. What do you mean? Natasha asked. If you don't keep it a secret, I won't provoke the people I don't want to provoke. If you want to keep it a secret, I'll have my ways to find out the people I want to know about, Lin Gu said. That's why I said there's no other meaning to what you're doing. Natasha smiled. That's not the case. If we don't want Mr. Carlos to know the client's information, you won't be able to get it from us. What happened with Mr. Helian today was my mistake. I didn't expect the two of you to have such good hearing. This has nothing to do with hearing. Lin Gu said, you said those words in front of us. Even if we read your lips, we can still tell that it's Chinese characters. Everyone looked at each other. Also, I can find out what I want to know. That's not the only thing I'm talking about. Lin Gu looked at Su Yun. The two of them had a tacit understanding. Su Yun could read Lin Ji's intention from his eyes. Then, what do you mean? Courtney questioned, slightly annoyed. What do you think you can do? I think that if I want to know something that Mr. Baldwin doesn't want to tell me, I have my own way to solve it. Lin Gu raised his eyebrows, a provocative look on his face. At that moment, Su Yun suddenly made his move. Su Yun's actions were completely beyond Natasha and Courtney's expectations. Before Baldwin could even react, Su Yun had already placed the sushi chopstick against his throat. As long as Su Yun exerted a little force, the chopstick would pierce through Baldwin's throat. Baldwin didn't dare to move anymore. Courtney did not hold back. She furiously pulled out a dagger and placed it against Lin Ji's neck. Lin Gu did not resist at all, allowing Courtney to place the dagger against his neck. He knew very well that while Baldwin's life was still in Su Yun's hands, Courtney would not dare to do anything to him. Do you dare to do it? As Courtney placed the dagger against his throat, Lin Gu casually said, Mr. Baldwin's life is in my people's hands. What you're doing will not do him any good. It will only increase his danger. Courtney, put down the dagger. Natasha glared. Courtney wanted to refute. However, when she turned her head and saw Baldwin's gaze, she reluctantly put away the dagger. She glared at Lin Gu with a furious expression. Now that's a good boy, Lin Gu said. Natasha looked seriously at Lin Gu and said, Mr. Carlos, the misunderstanding between us is quite deep, so, I hope that we can let bygones be bygones. Originally, I had already let bygones be bygones. However, you two have always been suspicious of me. Lin Gu said, I know that you have a sharp tongue. I also know that you are an important person by Mr. Baldwin's side. However, I do not wish to hear you speak again. There are some things that I need to discuss with Mr. Baldwin alone. Baldwin could feel the threat of the chopstick. Although it was just a chopstick, in the hands of someone who could control him in the blink of an eye, it was no less threatening than a gun. Natasha and Courtney were beside him. Yet, they were unable to stop Chen Xiaolian's attack. How could such speed not be intimidating? Carlos, this won't have any positive effect on our cooperation. Baldwin was someone who had been through a lot. Even so, he was able to remain calm. What do you want to talk about? We can talk about it properly. There is no need for this. Hurry up and send your men back. I guarantee that there will be no resentment. Mr. Baldwin, can I trust your words? Lin Gu asked. Of course, Baldwin said with certainty. Lin Gu shook his head and said, to be honest, I really don't trust you. It is just like how you don't trust me. Mr. Baldwin, this crisis of trust between us is not caused by me. It is caused by you. Then, what do you want me to do to resolve this crisis of trust between us? Baldwin smiled and maintained his calm. I will do whatever you say. If this can make you feel at ease, I am willing to cooperate with you. Other than cooperating with me, do you have any other way? Lin Gu smiled. If someone poses a threat to my life, I will say the same thing. Baldwin's smile was quite awkward. However, he had no other choice but to cooperate. How about this, Mr. Baldwin? If we want to trust each other, then tell me all your so-called secrets. I don't need too much. You just need to give me a list of all the bosses from Huaxia who have asked you to launder money. Lin Gu smiled. The smile disappeared from Baldwin's face. This request was simply impossible. Mr. Carlos, we have our own rules. This request of yours is breaking our rules. This is absolutely impossible. Natasha could not help but speak up again. Beauty, I remember saying that it is best if you do not speak. This is a conversation between me and your boss. Are you the boss of Baldwin Group, or is Mr. Baldwin the boss? Lin Gu said, if you always steal the limelight, people will criticize you behind your back and call you a femme fatale. Natasha was stunned. This had happened to her a long time ago. This is not a difficult question to ask. Lin Gu smiled. Mr. Baldwin, what you think is a secret is not a secret to me. I also have a list of names. The reason I asked you to give me this list is not because I want to know any secrets. I just want to see if you are sincere to me. If you give me a list of names, then you still do not trust me. I am afraid we can no longer be friends. Since you have it, there is no point in giving it to you. Baldwin shook his head. If you want my trust, there are many ways. Lin Gu insisted. But right now, I feel that this is the most reliable way. I said that I have the list, but Mr. Baldwin still does not trust me. That is why you are reacting this way. Trust? How could he trust him? Baldwin cursed inwardly. Damn it. Chapter 39-33. For the first time, Natasha noticed that there was something wrong with the two of them. It was meaningless for Carlos to ask for the list. Suddenly, Su Yun and Lin Gu became people from relevant departments in Natasha's eyes. This gave Natasha an irresistible sense of crisis. It's just a list, Lin Gu said with a smile. Mr. Baldwin, do you think it's more important than the trust between you and me? Baldwin's face was full of displeasure. This is no longer a matter of trust, Carlos. If you still want our partnership to exist, ask your people to put down their chopsticks. I don't have much patience. Then I'll tell you that I don't have much patience either. Lin Ji's face also darkened. Mr. Baldwin, I've made myself very clear. Carlos. You. Baldwin was so angry that he almost couldn't breathe. Boss, he's not Carlos. They didn't come to talk to us about cooperation at all. Natasha looked at the two of them warily. Boss, they came to us for the list of our partners in the Huaxia region. They might be the legendary people from the relevant departments in Huaxia. Who are you insulting? You're the one from the relevant departments. Your whole family is from the relevant departments. Lin Gu glanced at Natasha. But you're really smart, much smarter than the two of them. Since they had been exposed, there was no point in continuing to hide it. This Natasha was a smart person, and not the ordinary kind of smart. This kind of woman was very scary. There was no way to fool her at all. "Who the hell are you people?" Baldwin was furious. This news shocked him. Natasha's words were like a shot in the arm, filling Baldwin's chest with anger instantly. "Since you can tell, we won't hide it from you," Su Yun said. "We're just here for a list. We'll leave as soon as we get the list. We definitely won't delay your other business." Although Su Yun had Baldwin under his control, this was New York after all. He couldn't really do anything to Baldwin. If he did, whether he and Lin Ge could make it to Miami would be a serious problem. "By asking for the list, you're cutting off my source of income in Huaxia," Baldwin said with a sullen face. "Do you think you can take it and leave New York after I give it to you? Giving us the list is your business. Whether or not we can leave with the list is our business," Su Yun said. "You don't have to worry about that." Courtney suddenly attacked Lin Ge the moment Su Yun finished speaking. In the blink of an eye, Lin Ge grabbed Courtney's dagger that was aimed at his face. This guy actually wanted to catch him off guard. Courtney regretted giving up on controlling the other party just now. Now, he wanted to grab a new threat, but Lin Ge saw through him and took control of him. He had to use all his strength to break free from Lin Ji's control of his dagger. If he hadn't reacted quickly enough, his dagger would have been stabbed into his stomach. "Yo, trying to ambush me. Do you think I didn't take precautions?" "I didn't take precautions against anyone but you. One look and I can tell you're not a good person. You're sneaky and you attack whenever you want." Lin Ge said disdainfully, "If you want to play, I can play with you. But your boss is still in our hands. Shouldn't you keep a low profile?" Courtney, whose sneak attack failed, took 2 steps back. He tried to regain his balance but failed. Now, the situation was even harder to control. "Courtney, don't act rashly. Boss's safety is the most important thing." Natasha's thoughts were very clear. "You're right. Your boss's safety is what you need to worry about now. Su Yun, don't do meaningless things. The only solution now is to give us the list." Baldwin's breathing became slightly rapid. "If you give us the list, no one will know that you've broken your rules. Su Yun, actually, we're not from the relevant departments as you think. People from the relevant departments don't do things so efficiently. We just want to get a share of the profits from these people. It won't affect your business. We just need some money in Huaxia." "You're using the list to threaten my collaborators?" Baldwin said. "If you take their money, won't I also suffer losses?" Su Yun shook his head. "What we want is just a small part of it. I admit, Mr. Baldwin, you will suffer a small loss, but this loss is not worth mentioning compared to your life." Baldwin's face turned even uglier. "Boss, we can give them the list," Natasha said. Baldwin glanced at Natasha, not understanding what she meant. Natasha continued, "Now, you can find a pen and paper. I can tell you the names of all the collaborators in Huaxia. I can even tell you their phone numbers and how much they want to cooperate with us. I can tell you all of that. There's no need to bother." Su Yun smiled slightly. He would not trust a smart woman. "I believe that Mr. Baldwin has these things on his computer. Such important information will definitely be recorded on a computer. As for such an important computer, he will definitely carry it with him." Baldwin's and Natasha's faces changed. Courtney looked at Su Yun with a vicious gaze. "You'd better not get any ideas. You should take care of yourself first," Su Yun said. "If I can control Mr. Baldwin, I can control you as well. Besides, your opponent is him, not me." Courtney's gaze fell back on Lin Ge. "Who are you? Who are you?" "I am Lin Ge, also known as the Legend. You can call me whatever you want." Lin Ge smiled. "Who else do you think I am?" Courtney could not help but look at Lin Ge up and down again. Indeed. But how could this fellow do such a thing? Lin Ge was going to keep up the act. "No, that's impossible. How could you be Carlos?" "If you were Carlos, you wouldn't have done such a thing," Natasha said firmly. You're definitely not Carlos. I admit that you are very smart. However, that does not mean that everything you say is correct. Think about it, Lin Gu said. My father is dead, but people like him are still living happily. How can my heart be balanced? Of course not. If my heart is not at ease, what should I do? Of course, I have to ask those uncles for some money to spend. You can threaten them with a list of names. Baldwin sucked in a cold breath. You can actually think of such a method? What's wrong with this method? Isn't this a good method? Lin Gu smiled. At least I feel at ease. At least I feel at ease when I see those people. At least I can't let my family suffer. My dad is dead and I have no source of income. If they don't share some of it with me, how am I going to live in the future? Baldwin thought to himself, this kid is really narrow-minded. Let's put it this way, Mr. Baldwin. Once I get the money from them, as long as it enters the American empire, won't it still have to go through your hands? You won't lose out at all. Lin Gu said, it's just that the people looking for you have changed. I promise you, I will never betray you. You really think that? Baldwin still had a look of doubt on his face. Of course. Lin Gu said, this is the best solution. Otherwise, my heart will not be at ease. If not for this, why would I spend so much effort to see you? You don't really think I'm looking for you to transfer the money, do you? I'm not stupid. If I want to transfer it, I can think of a way to sell more properties. The whereabouts of the money will still be messed up and no one will be able to find it. Why would I waste so much money looking for you? Natasha and Courtney both frowned. They no longer trusted Lin Ge's words. Forget it. You won't believe me no matter what I say. I won't believe you no matter what you say. Now, let's get to the point. I want the list of names on your computer. Lin Gu said, no matter where your computer is, you have to take us there personally. I want you to hand the computer to me personally. Otherwise, I can't trust that you can guarantee the accuracy of the list. Baldwin clenched his fists slightly. He felt helpless against Lin Ge's shrewdness. Chapter 39-34. Due to Su Yun's constant threat, Natasha and Courtney did not dare to act rashly. After hearing Lin Ge's request, for the sake of Baldwin's safety, Natasha rushed to agree to Lin Ge's request. Of course, no problem. As long as you promise not to hurt the boss, we are willing to cooperate with any of your requests, Natasha agreed. Natasha, what are you talking about? Courtney glared at her in displeasure. The boss hasn't made a decision yet. How can you agree to their unreasonable request so casually? Natasha glanced at Courtney. Right now, nothing is more important than ensuring the boss's safety. We have to agree to their request. What else can we do? It's just a list of names. Compared to the boss's safety, it's not worth mentioning. Her words warmed Baldwin's heart. Originally, Baldwin wanted to blame her for making a decision so casually, but now, he was no longer angry. This was the reason why Natasha was able to stand by Baldwin's side. She was able to calm Baldwin down after she overstepped her authority. Not only would Baldwin not blame her for overstepping her authority, he would also feel that she was doing the right thing. Furthermore, she was very loyal. But if we give them the list of names, we will be going against our principles. Once word of this gets out, who else in Huaxia will be willing to cooperate with us? Courtney's consideration was also correct. He had to consider the bigger picture. Once he gets the list of names, he will go to Huaxia to look for those people. How can we guarantee that the matter of us handing over the list will not be leaked? Courtney's words were from the bottom of his heart. They were all for the good of the group. However, he had put Baldwin's safety aside. Although what he said was correct, it wouldn't earn Baldwin's approval. After all, for Baldwin, his own life was more valuable than anything else. Nothing could be more important than his life. Once we lose our trust with our business partners, we will lose our trust with the entire market. Huaxia's market is so big, Courtney suddenly saw the displeased look on Baldwin's face and stopped. Courtney realized that he hadn't thought everything through when he spoke, but he was anxious and couldn't have thought everything through. After all, as a man, he needed to look at the big picture. This was what Baldwin had always taught him, so he also considered the big picture. Mr. Baldwin, you should be the one to decide. This is my request, and my bargaining chip is your life, Lin Gu said. Baldwin shook his head. You don't dare kill me. If you kill me, you won't get any benefits. It will only leave you with nothing. If I don't get the name list, sooner or later, I will lose everything. Lin Gu shook his head. Although your disguise is very successful and you can deceive everyone and even the bank to get Carlos money, you can't deceive me. You are not Carlos. Baldwin shook his head. If it were Carlos, with billions of dollars in assets, he would never risk his life to have a falling out with me. The old fox was indeed an old fox. He directly exposed Lin Ge's identity. You are the ones who brought down Chuan Shan, right? Baldwin said coolly. Lin Gu didn't know how to deal with the old fox. He could only look at Su Yun. Su Yun smiled. Mr. Baldwin, for you to have everything you have today, you are indeed not a vulgar person. You brought down Chuan Shan, took control of his son, and came to me to cheat me of the name list. Ha ha, you want the name list, nothing more than to control and search for evidence on everyone on the list, then arrest them? Baldwin continued. You are right about one thing. You are indeed not people from Hua Xia's relevant department, because those people don't have the brains and courage that you have. Who are you? You are so good at guessing, so why don't you guess? Lin Gu said. Why are you still asking us? You are not a vulgar person. You are so capable. Lin Ge's cynicism made Baldwin's heart burn with anger. Mr. Baldwin, there is no need for you to ask about our identity at all. It is meaningless to you. Su Yun said, a name list can solve your urgent problem. This is the best choice for you. Baldwin still maintained his calm. You will let me go after I get the name list? Do you think I will believe that? Of course you won't. Su Yun said, getting the name list doesn't mean that we can leave safely. With your power in New York, you can launch a large-scale pursuit. When the time comes, even if the two of us have the best plan, I am afraid that we will not be able to escape. Since you and I both know this, why should I give you the name list you want? Baldwin said, I know very well that you will not let me go after you get the name list. You still need to hold me hostage to leave safely. Lin Gu thought to himself, aren't you too full of yourself? But he didn't say that out loud. If you hold me hostage and refuse to let me go, my people won't let you leave. I can't believe that you will let me go after you take me away, Baldwin said. If you want to put an end to and stop those people in Hua Xia who have the ability to obtain capital through illegal means and contact me again to transfer black capital, the best way is to kill me. Su Yun nodded and didn't deny it. That is indeed a very good idea. As long as I kill you now, everything will be resolved. Is that what you mean? Baldwin was stunned for a moment. If it were really as simple as you say, I would have indeed attacked you directly. Su Yun said, but it's not that simple. You and I both know that our goal is not your life. Baldwin smiled and didn't say anything. I know that your people must have started to surround this place as quickly as possible, Su Yun said. I know that you are stalling for time in your way. But Mr. Baldwin, your stalling is meaningless. As long as you are still in my hands, no matter how many people come, they can't do anything to us. Baldwin wanted to nod, but because Su Yun's chopsticks were at his throat, he had to give up. Okay, I promise you. I will take you to get the list. Su Yun knew that he would agree. After he agreed, Baldwin would have more time to arrange for his men to take control of New York. Although Baldwin didn't say anything, he would use his actions to let Su Yun know that even if he could get the list, he would never let him leave New York. You should have been so straightforward earlier. Why did you have to be so hesitant? Lin Gu got up and said, Thank you for your hospitality today. This sushi is really good. If there is a chance, I will come again. Will you treat me next time? Baldwin smiled and nodded. Of course. But in his heart he thought, if you can live until then. Courtney, arrange a car, Baldwin said. Yes. No need. Su-Yun said, Mr. Baldwin, you can only follow me now. I will take you to my car. You can arrange where to go. Aren't you afraid that the two of them will immediately gather more people after they leave your sight? Baldwin asked. Su-Yun shook his head. Even if they don't gather more people, there will be others who will gather more of your men. Baldwin, don't take us for fools. All the surveillance footage in this restaurant will be under the eyes of your men. Do you think we haven't thought of this? Lin Gur also said, just let your men seal off New York. Anyway, as long as you are in our hands, they won't dare to act rashly. How do you know that no one will take this opportunity to defect? Baldwin asked naturally. Both Su-Yun and Lin Gur shook their heads. As long as Courtney was still around, no one would dare to take advantage of someone else's perilous situation. Courtney's loyalty to the group was quite high. If someone dared to act rashly at this time, there was only one result. Courtney would slit their throat and send them to see God, no, to see Satan. If someone dared, you wouldn't be so calm. Su-Yun smiled and said, Let's go, Mr. Baldwin. At least so far, you have been cooperative. I have been polite to you. Chapter 39-35. Su-Yun and Lin Gu took Baldwin to the parking lot and threw him into their escort van. Natasha and Courtney could not stop them at all. Although there were hundreds of people outside, they did not dare to act rashly because of Baldwin's safety. Baldwin also gave them orders to calm down and deal with the current situation calmly. The current situation was already out of their control. Now, we've done as you said. Are you satisfied? Baldwin said, The list you want is indeed in the computer of my villa in New York. I just put it back before I came to see you. If I knew you wanted it so much, I would have brought it here. If you knew we wanted it, I'm afraid you would have hidden it even more tightly, Lin Gu said. If you were not afraid of death, would you be so cooperative? If I were afraid of death, I wouldn't have achieved what I have today, Baldwin said to Lin Gu with some pride. Su-Yun motioned for Lin Gu to drive carefully and not be distracted. Baldwin's people could definitely appear at any time to rob the van. It was better to be careful. Mr. Baldwin, I admit that you are a person who is not afraid of death. A person who is afraid of death cannot establish his own empire. Su-Yun nodded. But once you establish your own empire, will you still not be afraid of death? Baldwin was stunned for a moment. Our Hua-Xia has gone through many dynasties. The founding emperors of each dynasty were not afraid of death. If they were afraid of death, they would not play this kind of power game, Su-Yun said. But once they establish their own empire, no one wants to die. Baldwin had actually never thought about this question. Perhaps now that he was successful and famous, no one could threaten him, so he did not think about whether he would still be afraid. Then he thought that he was the same as before. He was not afraid of things like death at all. Now that he heard Su-Yun say this, Baldwin really did have a slight feeling. He realized that he did not want to die. Dying was equivalent to losing everything. This was a very painful realization. When people were alive, the poor would always envy the rich. Because they were rich, they could enjoy themselves. However, when it was time for people to leave this world, all the rich would envy the poor. The wishes of the poor before they died were usually easily satisfied. They did not have much, so there was nothing to regret when they left this world. But it was different for rich people. Once he died, he would lose the courtyard house in the second ring road, the villa in Daoyutai, and he would not have the chance to spend his hundreds of billions of savings. The beautiful women around him, the luxury cars, and everything else would be gone. How could he not be depressed? Therefore, the richer a person was, the more painful their death would be. This was also the reason why the richer a person was, the more afraid they would be of losing and the more afraid they would be of death. Baldwin hadn't thought about it before, so he didn't think too much about it. Today, Su-Yun exposed him, and he realized that he had become very afraid of death. Immortality, immortality, indestructibility, eternal youth. Su Yun smiled slightly. If such a legend really existed, Mr. Baldwin would definitely go crazy for it. Immortality was something that people yearned for. Even ordinary people were like this, let alone the emperors who were above everyone else. Baldwin now had his own criminal empire. One had to know that the emperors who founded their own empires in Huaxia had all dreamed of something impossible. They all wanted to live forever, and they had been pursuing it tirelessly. However, no one had ever realized it. If it could be realized, the world would have been in chaos long ago. Speaking of which, Qin Shi Huang was a person who fanatically pursued the art of immortality. Not only was he the first emperor in Huaxia to become an emperor, but he was also the first person in Huaxia to pursue the elixir of immortality. During the Qin and Han dynasties, the art of medicine had gradually matured, and the trend of alchemy was prevalent. Among them, Su Fu was the most important. Qin Shi Huang asked him to refine the elixir of immortality. However, refining the elixir of immortality required a medicinal primer, and this primer had to be the blood of the phoenix. Therefore, Qin Shi Huang sent people all over the country to search for the phoenix's whereabouts. Su Fu had some skills, but he knew better than anyone whether the elixir of immortality really existed. However, in order to save his life, he could only talk nonsense. However, there was also a limit. Su Fu knew better than anyone else that if he couldn't produce the elixir, he would lose his head. However, he also had a way. He knew how to fool people, and at least he was good with words. He suggested to Qin Shi Huang that he choose 500 virgin boys and girls from Dongdu Immortal Island to ask for the elixir of immortality for Qin Shi Huang. Of course, this was just a pretense. This was a way to escape. Reality proved that it was a good idea. Although Li Si said that all the land in the world belonged to the emperor, at that time, the overseas dynasties couldn't care less. In the end, Qin Shi Huang was still alive and well in Shangxi's mausoleum. However, the pursuit of the elixir of immortality didn't stop there. Instead, it became more and more intense. The development of the elixir of immortality started with Qin Shi Huang. Emperor Wu of Han was also a pursuer of the elixir of immortality. He had a palace that refined elixirs, and would often eat the so-called immortal elixirs. However, no one who ate the immortal elixirs had a long lifespan. Originally, they wanted to eat the immortal elixirs to live longer. In the end, they could have lived to the end of their natural lifespan. However, eating the so-called immortal elixirs for a long time didn't allow them to live for more than a few years. The mortality rate of eating the immortal elixirs was extremely high. However, it didn't affect the emperor's pursuit of immortality. Even Li Shiming, who was called the Heavenly Khan by the people, had eaten the so-called immortal elixirs before. This was especially so during Li Ji's reign. He worshipped the art of medicine and ate the immortal elixirs almost every day. In a few years, he passed away. In the Ming dynasty, there were also people who were even weirder. For example, Zhu Yijuan, who was obsessed with the path of immortality. This brother was even more unimaginable. If there was someone who wrote immortal cultivation novels, he would definitely reward that person with tens of thousands of gold taels, right? Anyway, this brother cultivated in seclusion all day long and didn't go to court. He even built a Taoist temple in the palace and cultivated in seclusion every day. He only had one dream, which was to ascend to immortality. He was also a person who often ate the immortal elixirs. He even ate the immortal elixirs until his body was corroded by poison and covered with poisonous sores. However, he didn't think that it was because of the immortal elixirs, so he continued to eat them. In the end, he passed away a few years later. To put it bluntly, those so-called immortal elixirs back then were just poisons after a chemical reaction. The immortal elixirs were filled with heavy metals. They were all poisonous metals, and some even contained mercury. How could one not die after eating them? Science wasn't in place, and ignorance killed people. Those emperors were just deceiving themselves and others. However, why did they still enjoy it? Wasn't it because they wanted to be immortal and to be able to hold on to the power in their hands? In any case, once a person had a supreme status, they definitely didn't want to die. This wasn't a lie. Therefore, it was impossible for Baldwin to say that he wasn't afraid of death. He just hadn't faced this problem head-on. If the threat of death was really placed in front of him and he still said that he wasn't afraid of death, that would be really strange. If you die, everything you have will be for naught. Don't you think you're betting a little too much on whether we really dare to kill you? Su Yun smirked as he hammered Baldwin's words. Baldwin's expression became uglier and uglier, and more unnatural. However, Baldwin didn't want to show weakness in front of Su Yun. Have you seen the real New York Mafia? Su Yun shook his head. I believe that you don't want to see it, Baldwin said. Yes, I really don't want to see it, Su Yun said. This is also the only reason you believe that I don't dare to kill you, right? Although I haven't seen the Mafia in New York, I know the history of the world. I also know that the most serious riots in the history of the American Empire, the conscription riots, were inextricably linked to the Mafia. Baldwin nodded. You can say that they are related, but you can also say that they aren't. This, no one can say for sure. Back then, the New York riots were indeed very serious. It was said that it was because the president issued a conscription law that required all able-bodied men to enlist in the army unless they paid $300. This seriously unfair conscription system ignited the anger of the poor. Tens of thousands of people burned, killed, and looted in the streets. To put it bluntly, this policy was equivalent to giving the rich and privileged classes immunity from military service. The poor who couldn't pay $300 had to go to the front lines of the Civil War as cannon fodder. Chapter 39-36. At that time, many of the gang members belonged to the poor class, especially the black people. Many black people joined the army as the replacement for the rich. It was said that the Irish immigrants had it even worse. Most of the young Irish men were forced to sign voluntary military service papers when they arrived at New York Harbor. They were immediately sent to the front lines, leaving their wives and children behind. The conflicts that had been accumulating for a long time finally exploded. The people who had been recruited began to riot under coercion, attacking all public institutions. The streets of New York could be said to be on fire everywhere. At that time, extreme racism in New York also began to rise. The black people became the primary target of physical attacks. Many black people were beaten to death, hanged, and lit on lanterns. It was said that in the end, the only way to suppress the riots was to mobilize the infantry and naval gunboats. It was a big joke for such a country to say that they cared about human rights. Anyway, in the eyes of many people, the American Empire said that they were a country that respected human rights the most. The complicated relationship between New York's gangs and the American Empire's politics could not be explained in a few words. In the past, the gangs of the American Empire had helped the government. The Nazi forces entered the American Empire like wildfire following the German immigrants. Hundreds of thousands of Americans joined the Nazi forces. The government had a headache. It was the gangs of the American Empire that stood up and formed a united front with the government. They used the methods of gangs to attack the Nazi forces head-on. It was at that time that the secret alliance between the gangs and some departments of the American government was slowly established. Throughout the 1930s, the Mafia of the American Empire did not cause any trouble for the American government in terms of murder and arson. At that time, the main force of the anti-fascist forces in the American Empire was the violence of the gangs. Street violence happened almost every day. As long as they saw a place with a Nazi emblem or a Nazi flag, the gang members would wave their fists and weapons to attack. They would beat them until they were almost crippled. Of course, the Nazis would not tolerate it easily. They would also fight back. This made the gangs respond in a more violent way. Due to the constant street violence between gangs and former Nazi forces in the United States, Bosch was worried. He was afraid that more violence would arouse the hatred of the German Nazis in the United States, so he reduced the huge amount of financial aid to the American Nazis. The gangs' fists finally stopped the Nazis' spread. To the American people and the American government, although the gangs were not heroes, and they did all kinds of evil, they still loved their country deeply. There is a very classic narration in it. I remember it very clearly. What do you mean? Baldwin made himself look as calm as possible. If you want to kill a king, you can't do it in the dark. You have to let everyone witness his death, Su Yun said with a faint smile. Hearing those words, Baldwin was completely dumbfounded. Su Yun's words seemed to have completely destroyed his self-confidence. Did he want everyone to witness his death? The threat of that sentence was obviously higher than all the previous threats. Baldwin looked at Su Yun in surprise. He did not expect everything to be different from what he had imagined. If your death does not attract the attention of the entire New York and even the entire American Empire, I will not do anything to you. Su Yun said, if you die in the dark, there will be a lot of rumors to cover up the truth. No one will admit the real cause of your death. Sweat had already broken out on Baldwin's forehead. Now, all of New York is paying attention to this matter. Whether it is the mafia or the government, everyone is paying attention to this matter. Su Yun smiled. If you really force me into a corner, I will take you to Times Square and kill you in front of the whole world. Baldwin suddenly realized that the fewer people who paid attention to this matter, the safer he would be. But now, his men had probably launched a comprehensive control and blockade of New York. It was impossible for him not to attract attention now. If you want to kill a king, you can't do it in the dark. You have to let everyone witness his death. This was simply the most frightening threat Baldwin had ever heard in his life, and this was also the first time in his life that he felt so afraid of death. Su Yun used the barefoot is not afraid of wearing shoes method to convey a message to him. And it also made Baldwin realize that everything he had now was far more than a gamble for them. It was a gamble that was not worth betting on, but Baldwin was forced to sit at the gambling table. I admit that I lost to you. Baldwin's eyes lost some color, but there was genuine admiration. I didn't expect you to have such a scheme at such a young age. You have led me into a trap that I was completely unaware of. Su Yun just smiled and did not answer. Everything my men are doing now is what you have long predicted. You have calculated everything in this game. Baldwin could not help but shake his head. He had lived for so long, but this was the first time he had been fooled by someone. If Su Yun's words had not woken him up, Baldwin would have thought that everything was under his control. In fact, the whole situation had already run away with the other party. He had no self-control at all. The current situation had been ruined by the two young men in front of him. This is called great talent and strategy, right? Baldwin sighed. Chapter 39-37. Under Baldwin's guidance, the car soon arrived at the wealthy villa area in Long Island. As everyone knew, Long Island was the area where the rich gathered in New York. Not only the rich in the United States, but also rich people from other countries like to buy property here. The villas in many small towns on Long Island had their own characteristics. It was also considered one of the tourist attractions for foreigners. After all, the Montague Lighthouse here was quite famous. Baldwin also had his own feelings about the Montague Lighthouse. Although the Montague Lighthouse was not luxurious and was just an ordinary lighthouse in its natural state, it was the guiding light for foreign dreamers to immigrate to the United States. Anyone who saw the lighthouse meant that they were about to land on the American continent. Then, they could start their dream journey. Although Baldwin was not the first person to arrive in the United States through the lighthouse, the first time he came to New York, he also secretly took a boat. After all, he was already a notorious guy, and the United States would not welcome him. As the car got closer to the Long Island Villa area, Lin Gu liked this place more and more. Those who could live here must have a certain economic foundation because it was prosperous but not noisy. It was fashionable but not messy. The villa was surrounded by tall trees. It was like living in a forest. Although it was night, the car lights could still shine on the wild ducks and geese that could be seen everywhere by the roadside. It made Lin Gu feel like he was in a garden. He could not help but exclaim that it was like living in a park. There were also many Hua Xia celebrities' properties in this place. They also liked to come here for vacation. Compared to Hua Xia, the life of picking blueberries, picking mulberries, and watching egrets and swans leisurely swaying around was like a dream. Baldwin's villa faced the sea. It sat on a beautiful sea view. 80% of the people living here were white people. In addition to the sea view, there was a dense forest around it. There was also a huge hillside golf course. Not to mention the villa's appearance, there was a garden, grass, and forest outside the villa. The area occupied by these greenery was larger than all the greenery in Huaxia's residential area with more than 5,000 families. The value of residential property in the United States was based on the environment. The environment was a very important criterion. The rich lived on the top of the mountain while the poor lived in downtown apartments. This was the opposite of Huaxia. Huaxia's rich people all lived in the bustling downtown area, while those who lived on the mountaintop were the elderly who stayed behind from poor families. The environment is pretty good, Lin Gu said to Su Yun while driving. Su Yun nodded. The environment was indeed not bad. This is the difference between the United States and Huaxia. Baldwin said calmly, the rich people of the American Empire are after the environment. They want to stay away from pollution, have a climate that is neither humid nor dry, and have a quiet, bright, and elegant environment. It would be best if there were many types of docile beasts in the midst of birds and flowers. Haha, returning to nature, they want the true meaning of blue skies, white clouds, and sunshine. In order to pursue this, the rich people of the American Empire were even willing to spend several times more US dollars to find a good location to build a villa. You Huaxia are different. The more polluted and noisy a place is, the more ridiculously expensive it is. What Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou? Those buildings in the city that are so noisy that it's almost impossible for people to live in them can be sold at such a terrifying price. It's simply unbelievable. Baldwin smiled. Su Yun and Lin Gu ignored him because what he said was the truth. Baldwin seemed to want to use chatting to ease the tension between them. He had already admitted defeat and did not want Su Yun to really poke a hole in his throat in Times Square. Actually, the difference between Huaxia and the United States is still very big, Baldwin continued. Where I live, there's hardly any fat people. Rich people pay attention to aerobic exercise. Fat people can be seen everywhere in Harlem and Brooklyn because there are many poor people there. The poor people only know how to stuff chicken, duck, and fish into their stomachs. It's as if they are eating government handouts and not eating them. Su Yun glanced at Baldwin and felt that he was showing off. I know a rich person from Huaxia. It's said that he started a coal mining business more than 10 years ago. Baldwin said, he's probably one of the richest people in China. The villa he lives in is also luxurious. Although he's not tall, he's extraordinarily fat. He told me about his life, and it's indeed extravagant. The milk he drinks is human milk, the eggs he eats are chickadee eggs, the daily essential nutrients are sea cucumber, bird's nest, lobster, and turtle. For beef, he only eats Wagyu beef that is flown in from Japan. The potatoes are from Nuwamage, the caviar is albino fish from Iran, and the desserts must be accompanied by black truffles or even white truffles. Stop, the person you are talking about is a nouveau riche from Huaxia more than 10 years ago, Su Yun said. Now, the rich people from Huaxia don't eat like that anymore. Baldwin was stunned for a moment. Don't treat us rich people from Huaxia as country bumpkins and nouveau riche, okay? Lin Gu was also unhappy. Don't look at people through colored glasses, okay? Baldwin smiled awkwardly. The person I am talking about is the truth. It's not a fabrication. In Huaxia, there are country bumpkins and nouveau riche who eat more extravagantly than this person you know. Su Yun said, not all the rich people in New York are like what you say. The nouveau riche in New York is the same. They can be as extravagant as they want. Yes, that is indeed the case. Baldwin nodded. It takes 3 generations for one aristocrat to be born. A real aristocrat does not pursue money, but good interpersonal relationships, Su Yun said. Aristocrats and nouveau riche are different. Their views on money are completely different. In the eyes of nouveau riche, only money equals money. In the eyes of aristocrats, information is money, and they are very wary of the tendency to pursue money and material things. The rich people you are talking about in the American Empire must be from aristocratic families that have been rich for 3 generations. Their ancestors were aristocrats in Europe. Baldwin nodded in agreement. And the rich person from Huaxia you are talking about is a country bumpkin who got lucky and made a lot of money by relying on his luck. Su Yun said, he can't be considered a rich person from Huaxia. The rich people from the big families in Huaxia wouldn't do something like that. Yeah, Huaxia has been around for thousands of years. The big families must be even more unfathomable. Baldwin said, it's said that the Kong Consortium can be considered the #1 aristocratic family in the world. That's true. I'm afraid there really isn't a family that has a longer history than the Kong Consortium in this world. Su Yun said, there are already 80 generations. Let's not talk about those before that. Starting from the 5th year of Qianlong in the Qing dynasty, there were Xing, Yu, Chuan, Ji, Guang, Zhao, Xian, Qing, Fan, and Xiang. Then to the 19th year of the Qing dynasty, there were Ling, De, Wei, Chue, Yu, Qin, Shao, Nian, Xian, and Yang. The 80th generation should have reached the Yu generation. There are still Qin, Shao, Nian, Xian, and Yang. But the modern Beiyang government added another 20 characters and directly determined the generations from the 86th generation to the 105th generation of the Kong Consortium. It was true that the world was big, but which family dared to say that they could last more than 100 generations? This was an unbelievable deification. The Kong Consortium already has 80 generations of descendants? Baldwin's eyes widened in surprise. He had only heard some superficial information before, but when he heard the details today, he was completely dumbfounded. It was much more amazing than he had imagined. But let me tell you first. The Kong Consortium is not the aristocratic family you think it is. Su Yun said, the Kong Consortium emphasizes that even if they live in poverty, they will never complain about the environment they live in. Even if they live in poverty, they will still pour all their passion into educating their children. The more successful they are, the more they have to learn and understand by themselves. Even if they fail, they will never be discouraged. They will use their tenacious spirit to arm themselves. Amazing. Baldwin gave him a thumbs up in admiration. This admiration came from the bottom of his heart. The closer the car got to Baldwin's villa, the more people there were. Needless to say, these were all Baldwin's subordinates. More and more of them rushed over to help Baldwin after hearing the news that something had happened to him. It looks like many people want to see with their own eyes if you will be able to keep your life. Su Yun smiled. Mr. Baldwin, you can be considered a successful person. So many of your subordinates rushed over after you got into trouble. It's not easy. Chapter 39-38. Baldwin just smiled faintly. Speaking of which, such a scene was still very heartwarming for him. At least in his opinion, these brothers were still very humane. The people in the Baldwin group were grateful to Baldwin, especially this group of people in New York, because they all had a better life because of Baldwin. Of course, the better life here was not worthy of a stable and harmonious life, but a much better life compared to before, especially in the economic aspect. The Baldwin Group was now regarded as the largest mafia organization in New York, and in addition to New York, Baldwin had tens of thousands of people all over the United States to do things for him. As for these subordinates of his, without exception, they had all led bloody, violent, and fearful lives before they joined him. They were anxious in the midst of violence every day. Not only did they have to prevent the attack of their enemies, but they also had to be on guard against the pursuit of the police. This kind of life was really painful. Although they did not take any drugs except marijuana, this was only to preserve their fighting strength. Otherwise, they would not live long. Of course, there were also many gang members who were addicted to drugs. These people were very indifferent to life. They felt that they would not live long anyway. Before they died from drugs, they would die from violence, so they did not care about taking drugs. Bibles, guns, bullets, and money. These were perhaps the only things that a gang member could not do without. However, they never had enough money to spend. Moreover, they had to hide from place to place in fear every day. It was no different from being in prison. Moreover, the children of gang members were destined from birth to become a member of the gang when they grew up. This choice was obviously helpless. The environment determined the child's fate. Take Hua Xia for example. Once the elders in the family were civil servants, the children would be forced to take the civil service exam. If the family was in the business, the children would also learn to do business from an early age. Death was the most common thing for them, so they were always in anxiety and fear. The drug trade was almost their only source of income. Drugs, violence, guns. The seemingly unrestrained life of the street gangs was in fact full of danger. Absolutely no one would want to be a member of a gang. However, fate was fate. It was the fate of these Americans who were born in a mafia environment. After all, they weren't like those big families from Europe. Other than joining the mafia, they didn't have much of a way out. And it was at this time that Baldwin appeared. Although they were still in a gangster's environment, Baldwin brought them more direct benefits. The initial capital accumulation of this drug empire was based on drugs. These people who worked for Baldwin's drug empire naturally became Baldwin's confidants. For those who were recognized by Baldwin, their lives were no longer filled with drugs, violence, and guns. Their lives were filled with their own houses and even villas. They had luxury cars instead of the dilapidated 9-hand Alto from 20 years ago. They had more money, enough money for them to squander. With money, they had countless women. This kind of life was something that many gang members didn't even dare to imagine before they met Baldwin. Therefore, these people were very grateful to Baldwin. When something happened to Baldwin, these people naturally rushed over. They couldn't just stand by and watch Baldwin being controlled by others. No matter which country they were from, be it the United States, Russia, Europe, or Australia, there was something else that was very important other than the fact that they were ruthless and violent in their methods, as long as they were able to make a living and achieve a respectable position. That was to value friendship. Baldwin was a person who valued friendship. That was why he was valued by these men. As long as they could really gain his trust, they would all realize more than the good life they had imagined before. Baldwin would talk about friendship with anyone who was loyal to him. If someone was willing to stand up and take a bullet for Baldwin, he would give him an endless supply of bullets. This way of doing things allowed Baldwin to gain the support and recognition of all his brothers in the early days. This kind of support had lasted for so many years. It was already a kind of support that went with the flow. When Lin Gu drove the escort car directly into the courtyard of Baldwin's villa in Long Island and stopped, the hundreds of people surrounding the villa all flashed their weapons. The 10 middle and senior managers of Baldwin's crime syndicate in New York were all here. Each of them brought at least 20 men, all of whom were fully armed. For a moment, the sound of bullets being loaded could be heard. "Mr. Baldwin, I suggest you tell them first. Su Yun, in case someone shoots when we take you out of the car, I will reflexively use you as a shield. At that time, you will be the one who is at a disadvantage." Baldwin nodded seriously. He was very clear about the consequences once someone opened fire. The sound of gunfire was equivalent to a stimulant. Once the first person opened fire, the others would be excited. At that time, the bullets wouldn't have any eyes. Although the firepower of so many people would definitely make Su Yun and Lin Gu fall here, he might not be able to keep his life. After all, he was still in the hands of others. Su Yun motioned for Lin Gu to open the skylight of the escort car. Then, he patted Baldwin's shoulder and motioned for him to stand up and stick his head out for his men to see. Baldwin stuck his head out of the skylight. In an instant, hundreds of guns were aimed at him. It wasn't clear who was the first to see Baldwin's face clearly. He loudly reprimanded, "Put down your guns. Be more spirited. Look carefully. This is our boss. This is Mr. Baldwin. Put down your guns. Quick." Hundreds of guns were put down again. No one dared to point their guns at their boss. It was tantamount to courting death. "Are you crazy? Unload your bullets. Quick." Because the leaders were all worried that their men would accidentally injure the boss, they were all rather angry, and their anger was also greater. The more they cared, the more worried they were, and the more cautious they were. "Boss, what is going on here? Did the people in the car do something to you?" "Boss, don't worry. We will definitely get you out. I will never let go of the people who kidnapped you. I want them to know New York and know that this is not a place where they can do as they please." At that moment, Courtney and Natasha, who had followed Soo-Yun's car all the way to the villa, also arrived. Courtney stopped the car and opened the door to run out. Natasha followed closely behind. When everyone saw Courtney, they all shut up. They all willingly handed over the leadership of the scene to Courtney and Natasha. "Don't act rashly," Baldwin calmly said. "They did not do anything to me. We are going to get out of the car now. When we get out, I don't want to hear any gunshots. I hope you can listen to what I am saying and remember every word I say." Everyone was silent. They did not know if they should listen to this order or not. It was not that they did not want to listen to Baldwin. Rather, they did not know if Baldwin's words meant the opposite. They could not be sure. They did not have the logical ability to think about this question. Most of the time, there were two meanings behind the words of the gang members. One was to follow the literal meaning of the words, while the other was to follow the opposite meaning of the words. Baldwin's actions made them unable to figure out what their boss meant. "Boss, don't worry. No one will open fire." Natasha saw that everyone was hesitating and she emphasized Baldwin's words. "The boss's safety is the #1 priority. You all had better be smart." Natasha was Baldwin's think tank. Her words carried a lot of weight. Those who had followed Baldwin for many years knew that very well. Therefore, after hearing Natasha's words, everyone no longer hesitated and doubted. They quietly turned on the safety on their guns to prevent them from accidentally firing and causing more trouble. Chapter 39:39. "Boss, please tell them that our men will not open fire." Seeing that the situation was under control, Natasha said to Baldwin, "It is safe to get out of the car." There was no need for Baldwin to pass on the message. Soo-Yun could hear it from inside the car. Remove the safety, load the gun and pull the trigger. Even an idiot can do it in 2 seconds. Soo-Yun said coolly from inside the car. "As for us, opening the door and getting out of the car, those 2 steps will take more than 2 seconds, right?" Baldwin understood what Soo-Yun meant and he turned to the people outside and said, "Everyone, remove the magazines and throw all the bullets on the ground." A look of shock appeared on everyone's faces. If that was the case, they would lose any chance of getting the upper hand. However, what Soo-Yun wanted was for them to lose any chance of getting the upper hand. Otherwise, how could they play with them? They were hundreds of armed criminal gangs from the United States Empire. They had committed murder, arson, and all sorts of despicable acts. Soo-Yun would certainly not engage in a chaotic battle with them. He would be at a disadvantage. Those street gangs may not be high class, but the so-called gangs under Baldwin's command were the equivalent of a mercenary army with considerable combat strength. It could even be said that their strength was beyond that. "Do as the boss says," Natasha continued. "Wait," Courtney suddenly shouted. He turned to Baldwin and said, "Boss, are we just going to let the two of them do as they please? If we give up everything, then in their hands, you will be even more." Baldwin's sharp gaze stopped Courtney in the middle of her sentence. "Do as I say. The boss has said it. Don't let him repeat it." After saying that, Natasha glanced at Courtney, seemingly questioning him as to what he was up to. Courtney originally did not intend to say anything else. However, Natasha's suspicious gaze caused him to blurt out once more. "Boss, as long as we can threaten and control them, they won't dare do anything to you. This is New York. They won't dare do anything to you." In Courtney's eyes, no one in this world would dare to lay a hand on Baldwin. After all, even the American government was afraid of them, let alone two Hua-Xia people. How could they dare to make a move? Different countries had different environments, resulting in different situations. What is the black in Hua-Xia? Gangs that used organized violence and threatened violence to commit crimes were called black gangs. They were a very complicated group. To put it simply, the government was the only institution that could legally use violence. Even if the violence was inappropriate, it could not be called black. Other than the political power of the country, the use of violence by individuals was basically not allowed. However, individuals were not organizations, so individual acts of violence were not considered as gangs or gangs. Using violence or threatening to use violence in an organized manner was considered a gang. If some of the people who held power gave some organizations the right to use violence, then it was called corruption. These people were the so-called protection umbrella. In Huaxia, the name protection umbrella was worn by individuals. The problem of corruption also arose from individuals. However, there was a certain difference between the American Empire and Huaxia. The American Empire's gangs were clearly a social organization in the American Empire. However, the growth of the American Empire's gangs was also related to the support of the American Empire's government. That was because the American Empire sometimes needed the help of the gangs to maintain international order. Looking at the history of the American Empire in detail was very interesting. Back then, the American Empire encountered the Great Depression. In order to stabilize the economy, the government at that time adopted a policy of using the gangs. However, when the next president came to power, he began to crack down on the gangs. However, during World War II, the status of the gangs in the United States improved. Due to the need to fight against the government, the gangs became the best friends of the American Empire's government to some extent. In the later part of World War II, the American army landed in Sicily. Sicily was the headquarters of the American Empire's mafia. In order to resist Mussolini, the Sicilian mafia gave the American Empire's army great cooperation. The American Empire did indeed need this cooperation. Therefore, at that time, the American government and the gangs actually had a secret cooperation relationship. Although Baldwin was not a member of the mafia, with his current ability to suppress the mafia, the American Empire also gave him the same treatment as the mafia in the past. It was a very ambiguous relationship. In some ways, for a very long time, those who could become the president of the American Empire needed the support of people like them. Kennedy was one of them. As a Catholic, that guy did not have much of an advantage in the election in the American Empire. He was able to become the president of the American Empire at that time by a small margin because he relied on the support of the American Mafia Alliance, including the financial support. Moreover, this guy even promised to appoint his godfather as the Minister of Justice after he was elected. Of course, in the end, this position was given to his own brother. From these aspects, it could be seen that every ruler of the American Empire had an inseparable relationship with the gangs who had huge financial power in the country at that time. It was said that the gangs of the American Empire once had huge economic benefits in the ancient 8 countries, but after a revolution called Castro, the gangs of the American Empire lost their money tree in the ancient 8 countries, so they hated Castro to the bone. The American Empire also did not like the establishment of a red regime next to its territory, just like how the American Empire could not tolerate the powerful red regime in Huaxia, which was located far away. Therefore, when it came to dealing with Caslort, the U.S. Empire and the Mafia were very close. Later, the American Empire's landing at the Bay of Pigs in the ancient 8 countries did not succeed. It seemed that because Kennedy was unwilling to send air support at the critical time, the gangs regarded him as a treacherous villain. Later, everyone knew that the president was assassinated. 5 years later, his brother, who became a presidential candidate, was also assassinated. This must have something to do with the gangs of the American Empire. Think about the common plaything of the 2 brothers, Marilyn Monroe. These 3 accidental deaths were also full of mysteries, causing countless people to be full of curiosity, reverie, and speculation. After all, the Hollywood of the American Empire was the money tree of the gangs. How could a little vixen like Monroe be played by the 2 brothers have nothing to do with the gangs? This messy relationship was something that happened many years ago. As time passed, the truth began to be revealed bit by bit and became clear. Why did it take so long to reveal it bit by bit? This was the unwritten rule of the American Empire. Many secrets could only be revealed after many years. In other words, the American Empire's government knew these secrets, but it did not want the public to know. But this greatly reduced the so-called open and transparent democratic system of the American Empire. The American Empire's agents were the most powerful in the world in terms of numbers and technology. No matter where the president went, his bodyguards followed him like a shadow. The security of the American Empire was also the best in the world. Under such tight security control, a president's head was blown up by a bullet for decades and they still could not figure out the truth? Who would believe that they did not figure it out? But even if they did figure it out, they could not casually announce it. These things were too disgusting. So, how many secrets were there between the American Empire's authorities and the gangs? Who could know? No one could know. It would take many, many years before the people in charge and the American Empire's gangs could be figured out bit by bit. Who knew what kind of power was behind the previous Osama? Did the Black Power want him to come to power and raise the black people's international status to the highest? What did he do when he became president? In international and domestic politics, he proposed to withdraw the troops, reduce the influence of Europe, return to the Asia-Pacific, rebalance the Asia-Pacific, reform the healthcare bill, reshape the American manufacturing industry. But none of them were particularly successful, right? On the contrary, in the years that he was in power, the international terrorist forces became stronger and stronger. The American Empire's government stopped functioning, the American Empire's domestic turmoil, the obedient Japanese dared to deny history, and Ukraine was in a crisis. How could such a useless person be the president? It was probably because he was obedient enough in front of certain people. Who dared to say that Trump's rise to power had nothing to do with Baldwin? Yes, it seemed that there was no relationship at all. But in 100 years, there might not be any earth-shattering secrets that would be revealed. Many things in the American Empire were like this. They could not be explained clearly. Chapter 39-40. Perhaps this was why Courtney was so confident. With the support of the entire American Empire behind him, anyone would have the audacity to do as they pleased. Courtney didn't believe that Su Yun and Lin Guo would dare to do anything excessive to Baldwin, so he didn't want to give up on their final restraining power. This was actually the same thought that Baldwin had in the beginning, but Baldwin didn't dare to think like this anymore. He could clearly feel that the two young people in front of him really dared to take his life. "Courtney, listen to Natasha's arrangements now," Baldwin said calmly. Then he returned to the car through the sunroof. The hundreds of people outside the car were dead silent. Everyone's eyes were focused on Courtney, as if they were all waiting for Courtney to bow down to Natasha. Courtney clenched his fists tightly. At this moment, he felt a little humiliated. Under Baldwin's command, Courtney and Natasha had always been on equal footing. No matter how much Baldwin doted on Natasha, Baldwin had never forgotten all of Courtney's contributions and loyalty. So Courtney didn't care about the unfavorable comments about Natasha. A long time ago, an internal member of the corporation had told him that sooner or later, Mr. Baldwin would become Natasha's puppet. When that time came, they would have to listen to Natasha's arrangements. Courtney was actually very conflicted about these words. He felt that these words were disrespectful to Mr. Baldwin, and he never thought that Natasha had the ability to play Mr. Baldwin in the palm of her hand. But just now, he suddenly felt that everything had changed. It was as if everything was under Natasha's control, and he had lost his original position of equal footing in front of Natasha. This position wasn't important to Courtney, but he couldn't stand being ignored like this. This attitude was a great humiliation to him. "You all heard what the boss said, right? Everyone, listen to my arrangements." Natasha glanced at Courtney. She knew very well that Courtney wouldn't be calm right now. Of course, there's also Courtney's arrangements. Courtney didn't react to this at all. "The only thing we need to do now is to ensure the boss's safety. Everything can only be done under the premise of the boss's safety," Natasha said. "Have I made myself clear enough? If it's clear enough, then immediately follow the boss's instructions." Courtney remained silent. However, he reacted with his actions. He was the first to empty the magazine in his pistol. Then, he flicked the bullets out one by one with his thumb and threw the magazine on the ground. Because Courtney was the first to do so, the others followed suit. Everyone pushed out the bullets in their magazines. For a moment, the ground of the villa was covered with all kinds of bullets. "Is this enough?" Courtney finally spoke. "You two better listen carefully. Everything we're doing now is according to your instructions. If our boss suffers even the slightest injury, I will tear you into pieces." Natasha didn't stop Courtney from venting. After Courtney's threat, she said, "You can rest assured. There is no longer any threat at all." Su Yun and Lin Gu could see everything that was happening outside from inside the car. Lin Gu smiled and said to Baldwin, "Your men are quite obedient. I said I would give you a list, so I will definitely give you a list." "I am not the kind of person who goes back on his word," Baldwin said. "Even if they don't throw away their weapons, you will not be attacked when you get out of the car. I can guarantee that with my integrity." "We don't trust your integrity," Lin Gu said bluntly. "You are wrong about that. Although I am not a good person, I can guarantee that I am a person with integrity," Baldwin said. Baldwin said, "I will never go back on my word." Su Yun smiled and said, "All of this refers to the people who are useful to you. Or rather, the people who are meaningful to you. It does not refer to your opponent's integrity. If you pay attention to your opponent's integrity, you will not be who you are today." Baldwin was startled. He did not expect Su Yun to be someone who understood people like them so well. Since realizing that things were out of his control, Baldwin had always thought that Su Yun was someone from Hua Xia's special department. These people would never understand people like them. However, based on Su Yun's understanding of these people, he was definitely not someone who had such experience. After all, Su Yun understood the underground world of Hua Xia. Everything in the world was similar. Baldwin was definitely the same as the people of the underground world. He would never pay attention to things like integrity with his opponents. Those who paid attention to these things would only die in the hands of their opponents in the end. "You promised everyone on your list that you would keep their identities a secret. However, when you realize that your life is in real danger, you will betray them," Su Yun said. "The so-called secrecy from before is just empty talk, isn't it?" Baldwin did not deny it. Of course, he did not answer the question. Su Yun's words were too sharp. Baldwin was unable to respond. "Mr. Baldwin, now is not the time to talk about this. Before we get the name list, your life might not belong to you at any time," Su Yun said calmly. "Get out of the car. If you go out in front, you will give your people more comfort." Lin Gu handed a pistol to Su Yun. Su Yun took the pistol and loaded it. Then, he opened the door. When Baldwin and the 2 or 3 people around him felt threatened, chopsticks were enough to deal with it. However, if he wanted to make the hundreds of people outside feel threatened, chopsticks were clearly not enough. A pistol was more of a deterrent. Baldwin opened the door unhurriedly and slowly got out of the car. Everything was done in a calm and unhurried manner. As the head of a large organization, it was even more important for him to maintain his composure at a time like this. Even if he was afraid of death, he could not show it on his face. Because what was at stake here was Hua Xia's so-called face. If Baldwin lost his composure here today and showed fear, all the prestige he had built up before would be swept away. A boss who lost his reputation would be looked down upon by all his subordinates. When that happened, even if he survived, Baldwin would not be able to control his criminal empire again. This was the cruel reality. Baldwin's criminal empire was built up bit by bit from the beginning. That was why he could control everything so easily. However, if he wanted to take over Midway, or if something happened that caused him to lose his prestige, it would be very difficult for him to control everything so easily. Boss. Everyone became nervous. If they had not thrown away their weapons earlier, some of them would have raised their guns again. Baldwin smiled faintly and did not respond. Su Yun followed closely behind and got out of the car. The pistol in his hand was pointed at the back of Baldwin's head. "Put the gun down." Courtney could not help but feel angry. Su Yun completely ignored him. Instead, it was Lin Gu, who jumped out of the driver's seat, who glared at him. "Are you ignoring your boss's words?" You have no right to speak here. You have to listen to beautiful Natasha in everything. Save it. Don't think of yourself as someone important. Courtney felt a dull pain in his heart. Those words were like a knife stabbing into his heart. He could not bear it. We just asked Mr. Baldwin to help us get something. You don't have to be nervous at all. Su Yun raised his voice so that everyone present could hear him. If we successfully get the thing, your boss will naturally return to your side. If anyone wants to prevent your boss from returning to your side, you can go ahead and create trouble for us. These words were actually very hurtful. Even if someone wanted to save Baldwin for his sake, they would not dare to act rashly. Now that Su Yun had made a big accusation of betrayal, whoever made a move now would mean that they did not want Baldwin to be safe. No one would dare to be the scapegoat. If any accident happened, they would be the culprit who killed their boss. Chapter 39-41. Ruan Qingxuang couldn't help but exclaim when she saw the real Korean farmhouses. They were not as good as the mountainous areas in her hometown. Zhou Meiyan smiled. You think too highly of them. Our farmhouses in Huaxia are hundreds of times better than theirs. The farmhouses here are even more dilapidated than those in African refugee villages. Don't think too highly of them. They were currently at a place about 30 kilometers away from the city center. The village here was right next to a national highway. It was especially sad. I suddenly thought of a question. Ruan Qingxuang said, you can always find the same scenes in different dramas. Appa's mansion is almost the same for 1,000 years. Could it be that they were all set in the same place? What do you think? Zhou Meiyan said helplessly. Even if Korea is rich, it's impossible for them to be like the rich people in Huaxia who can buy houses as toys. Korea's housing prices have been high for a long time. I don't know when it started. So the ordinary people living here live in dilapidated houses like those in Africa. Ruan Qingxuang shook her head with a bitter smile. I really have to say that the Koreans have strong mental fortitude. Zhou Meiyan didn't think so. Even so, they still have a sense of superiority and think that they are better off than Huaxia people. I really don't know if their brains are damaged or not. Do they have to live here for many generations? Ruan Qingxuang suddenly felt that the Koreans were a little pitiful. On the surface, Korea looked much richer than the neighboring Jin family. However, when it came to the level of ordinary people, they were about the same. The people with real power in the Jin family lived much better than the rich people in Korea. Therefore, in reality, the rich people in Korea were not as rich as the neighboring Jin family. The poor people in Korea were even worse off than the neighboring Jin family. In Korea, it's already a blessing to have a house to live in. Zhou Meiyan shook her head. There are many people who don't have a house to rent. Moreover, this place is the opposite of Huaxia. In Korea, high-rise apartments are more standardized in terms of property management, and the environment and facilities are also very good. At the same time, living in an apartment is a symbol of middle or high social status. Even if there are 8 or even 10 apartments per floor, the rent is very high. Ordinary people can't afford it. Is it difficult to rent a house? Ruan Qingxuang suddenly remembered that she used to have difficulties in Hadong, but it was not to the extent that she could not afford to rent a house. In Korea, being able to live in an apartment is definitely something that brings glory to one's ancestors. This is the ultimate dream of many ordinary Koreans. Zhou Meiyan smiled bitterly. When they hear that someone's family is living in a certain apartment, whether it's rented or bought, their eyes will naturally reveal a look of envy. It's really clear. Ruan Qingxuang shook her head helplessly. I've always thought that ordinary people in Huaxia live under a lot of pressure. Looking at Korea today, they seem to be even more stressed. The pressure to find a job in Korea is really very high. It's not because there aren't many jobs, but because all the Koreans, except for trainees and those who debut to become stars, seem to only want to be lawyers, professors, doctors, civil servants, and accountants. No one is willing to do other low-level jobs. Zhou Meiyan said. Those workers who do low-level jobs are almost all foreigners who come here to work. The pressure to find a job is so high, but they are still picky about their jobs. Ruan Qingxuang could not understand. It seems that Koreans are also very prideful. That's true, especially now that more than 80% of Koreans are university graduates. The competition to get a lawyer or civil servant position is very fierce. Zhua Meiyan shrugged. If they don't live well, their quality of life might be better, right? Ruan Qingxuang said. After all, one could not judge a book by its cover. Many people like to use their own values to measure others. Ruan Qingxuang felt that they were suspicious now. Perhaps Koreans did not care about the quality of the house, but the quality of life. The house did not look good from the outside, but the inside was actually not bad. Zhua Meiyan smiled. If you think so, you can find a random family to take a look. At most, they will have a TV, a refrigerator, and other common household appliances. Now, many people in Huaxia have high-tech products in their homes. To them, it is unimaginable. No wonder they can't afford to buy a house. Those who rent a house are considered to have a good life. Ruan Qingxuang sighed and said, actually, they are really pitiful like this. They can't be renting a house for the rest of their lives, right? It's not considered pitiful to be able to rent a house. Zhua Meiyan said, there is also a situation called borrowing a house. Borrowing a house has never happened anywhere in Huaxia, right? But here, it is a legal way to rent a house. You don't have to pay rent. Many Koreans like this. Live for free? Ruan Qingxuang was stunned when she heard this. This social welfare was too good. If Huaxia had such a system, everyone in Huaxia would be willing to do this. Of course, this does not mean that you can live in a house without paying a single cent. You have to pay a high deposit. According to market conditions, you have to pay more than 40% of the house price as the deposit. Zhua Meiyan said. Although the deposit is high, many people in Korea are willing to do this. Ruan Qingxuang frowned. The house does not belong to them? They have to pay close to 50% of the house price as the deposit. Are they willing to do this? Korea's property prices have been rising for many years. Because half of the country's population lives in Seoul, more than half of the population and families are suffering from high property prices. Zhua Meiyan smiled. Because of the high property prices, even if Koreans work hard for half of their lives, they can only earn enough for the down payment. At most, they can only earn half of the price of the house. The rest of the money is not enough for the rest of their lives. That's why this money is only enough to pay the deposit. You can't get a loan here. The interest rate is high. It is much higher than Huaxia's banks. Zhua Meiyan said. Furthermore, this country has become a capitalistic country. In this social environment, it is impossible to live by lowering the cost of living. The cost of living is not only food, lodging, and transportation. It is also a matter of maintaining one's social reputation and status. Without social reputation and status in Korea, it will be difficult to move forward in your career. That's why there are people bowing to you everywhere. They are humble because they do not have social status. But I think the cars the Koreans drive are quite good. Ruan Qingxuang said. If it is so difficult, they don't have to buy good cars. In Korea, reputation is very important. Normally, only close family members can visit the Koreans' houses. Ordinary friends will not go there. That's why they would rather live in a small house with one bedroom and one living room with their entire family. They will also fork out 100 million Korean won to buy a car. Zhua Meiyan said with a mocking tone. Because no one will be able to see the living environment, but the car can be seen by everyone. Why do I feel that it's a bit like you're trying to save your face? Ruan Qingxuang laughed dryly. Zhua Meiyan nodded. You are right. The Koreans are really suffering because of their reputation. This saying is very appropriate. I have always thought that our country's people are the most proud people in the world. I didn't expect. Ruan Qingxuang sighed and shook her head. How can I not think of it? Zhua Meiyan said. How many years ago, this land was a subordinate country of Huaxia. Didn't their ancestors have to pay tribute to the former emperor of Huaxia? Didn't they learn everything from us? Since we Huaxia people want to maintain our reputation, they must also want to maintain their reputation. Ruan Qingxuang laughed bitterly. I have to hand it to you. How can this be? That is the truth. Zhua Meiyan laughed and said, All right, let's just treat it as a joke. We've walked a lot and visited a lot of places. It's getting late, let's go to Luo Yan and have a good meal. We spent a lot of effort to book this place, so we must try it. The two of them quickly rushed back. In the eyes of the Koreans, the most delicious food was barbecue or Korean beef. The Koreans were really pitiful. They really didn't eat anything delicious. They only ate seaweed rice rolls, kimchi cabbage, and soy sauce crab all day long. In the whole world, the only Korean restaurant that could be considered good was probably Luoyan. This restaurant was Orthodox Korean food, which was passed down from the imperial family and the palace. It was the only Korean restaurant with 3 Michelin stars in the world. Zhua Meiyan and Ruan Qingxuang were going back to Huaxia tomorrow, so they decided to enjoy this unique Korean food today. After this meal, they would never come to Korea again. Chapter 39-42. When Ruan Qingxuang was sitting in the Luoyan restaurant on the 23rd floor of the Shilla Hotel, she heard that this hotel belonged to the Exploding Star Group. She felt a little disgusted. After all, this Exploding Star Group was too much of a scam to Huaxia. The mobile phone explosion was entirely their own problem. They recalled it to other countries around the world and didn't pay attention to Huaxia. Little did she know that Huaxia actually had many mobile phone users of the Exploding Star Group. Ruan Qingxuang was one of them. It was because they didn't sincerely apologize for the explosion that they completely lost this mobile phone brand that could easily explode. Perhaps this was also the reason why Zhua Meiyan didn't arrange to stay in this hotel. The Exploding Star Group really made a lot of money in Huaxia. The hotel was located in a prime location. As soon as it opened, it set off a new trend in the luxury hotel world. It could be considered a member of the world's most luxurious hotel organization, the world's first-class hotel organization. It was said that it was the only hotel in Korea where the heads of the world's 4 strongest countries had stayed. The Luoyan restaurant that the two of them came to was a place where many state banquets were held. As everyone knew, the chefs of Michelin-level restaurants were very particular about the ingredients. They strictly selected high-quality seasonal fresh ingredients. A team of food and beverage experts composed of ingredient procurement, dish development, and food connoisseurs would personally visit more than 100 ingredient suppliers every year to select and purchase grouper shellfish, mengzong bamboo shoots, pine nuts, mountain vegetables, Korean cattle, and so on. All of these were strictly purchased. Ruan Qingxuang and Zhua Meiyan could see that this restaurant was quite exquisite from the arrangement of the menu. All the details were done very carefully. This is really different from other ordinary Korean restaurants. Ruan Qingxuang looked around and said. Zhua Meiyan nodded. From the details, you can see that this is on a completely different level from those ordinary restaurants. The dishes on the table here are all equipped with different utensils. I heard that all the utensils are custom-made. Different dishes will have the most suitable utensils to hold them. This is too particular, Ruan Qingxuang sighed. I have to say that there are too many foodies in the world. Soon, the dishes were served. The amount of each dish in the set meal was very small, but judging from the appearance of the dishes, they were very exquisite. Every dish was like a work of art. This might be the highest standard of a Michelin restaurant. Although it was Korean food, the dishes were served slowly. Because all the ingredients were fresh, they were very particular about the timing. Every time Ruan Qingxuang and Zhua Meiyan finished the first dish, the next dish would be served. That was because every dish here had its own unique characteristics, and the cooking methods were also completely different. However, there was a connection and logic between them. There were 8 dishes here. This is about the same as the cold dishes at our banquet. There are 6 plates and 8 plates, Zhuo said. I think I'll lose weight after eating this. I can even feel full now. Ruan Qingxuang laughed and said, although I know that there is a main course to follow, these appetizers are so delicious that I can't stop eating. In reality, their worries were completely unnecessary. Because when the main course was served, they still couldn't stop eating. Every dish was exquisitely made. None of the dishes were served immediately. They were served at the most appropriate time, at the most appropriate temperature. Ruan Qingxuang, who had been in the food and beverage industry, couldn't help but sigh. The chefs are really amazing. Actually, your medicinal cuisine is also amazing. If you choose the ingredients like they do, I believe you can get a Michelin rating, Zhuo said. I don't dare to say 3 stars, but I think you can at least get a 1 star, right? A 1 star is already amazing. I don't want to think about it. It's impossible. Ruan Qingxuang shook her head. Besides, I haven't cooked for a long time. Ever since I came to Sky Entertainment, I've been completely screwed over by you guys. Zhuo laughed. I'm not the one who screwed you over. If you want to blame someone, blame Su Yun. It's all because of him. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have been so busy. As the two of them were talking, a bowl of raw beef rice was served. On top of the rice were frozen strips of beef. They were stacked into a shape and placed on top of the rice. Because the beef they usually ate was soft, they first had to freeze the beef to make it harder. Then, they had to cut it into strips and place it on top of the rice. Ruan Qingxuang blinked and looked at it. It looked like the pieces of hard food were stacked into a very artistic shape. Slowly, the strips of beef began to soften. They all hung down, giving Ruan Qingxuang a strong visual impact. It was said that high-end eating methods were very important to time and control. Today, she saw that the rumors were true. Whether it was Ruan Qingxuang or Zhuo, they had never tasted raw beef so refreshingly. After all, everyone's impression of raw beef was that it was bloody. Even when it was cooked, they still had to chew it hard. However, this dish of raw beef rice gave the two of them a different taste. They had used special utensils to hold the rice and the frozen beef. The beef was made from local high-end Korean cattle, so the beef itself had a slight sweetness. The frozen beef was paired with a special sauce. It was very comfortable to eat. Zhuo rolled her eyes. Did you set a location on me and Qingxuang? How do you know we're in Korea now? Chapter 39-43. Because it was Su Yun's matter to look for people, Ruan Qingxuang and Zhuo did not want to delay at all. They immediately rushed to the high-speed railway station and bought tickets to Busan. Many years ago, many people thought that only Seoul could be considered a city in Korea, and Busan was not in most people's impression of Korea at all. It was only in recent years that many people began to understand Busan. In fact, this city was quite big. There were a variety of marine tourist attractions, historical sites, and bustling shopping areas. For foodies, this place could be said to be heaven. Busan had the largest seafood market in Korea, and all kinds of seafood dishes were a feast for people. In short, Busan was the most charming city in Korea other than Seoul. But even so, the entire tourism market in Korea was quite stagnant now. The reason was very simple. It was because of what that woman surnamed Park said before. She definitely used her ignorance and shamelessness to once again use actions to break a new realm of shamelessness. Because this woman actually said that she would consider sanctioning Hua Xia people to travel to Korea. Really, it was not Hua Xia who was sanctioning Korea because of the deployment of THAAD, but Korea was going to sanction Hua Xia. It was because Hua Xia tourists went to Old Kim's house next door, which violated the sanctions resolution of the United Nations. It was also said that the money for Old Kim's nuclear test next door was sent by Hua Xia tourists. In order to completely stop the Kim family's third fatty from earning foreign exchange, the Koreans did not allow Hua Xia people to visit Old Kim's house next door. Moreover, the Hua Xia travel agency that sold Old Kim's travel products to Hua Xia people would also stop their business of applying for visas to Korea. Because of this matter, how many Hua Xia people would give her a 3-character classic? Under such circumstances, those who would travel to Korea and give money to Koreans were definitely idiots. They had already made such a powerful threat, why would they go? Would they die if they did not travel to Korea? Was Korea so *king developed? One had to know that the Koreans of this era were no longer the Koreans of the past. The Koreans of this era felt that they had become the most favored dog of the United States, so they began to learn hegemony from their masters. By doing this, the Koreans were saying, if I don't like it, no one is allowed to like it. If you dare to go to old Kim's house, you're not allowed to come to our Korean house in the future. To be honest, the Park woman had done a lot of things to Hua Xia over the years. She had done a lot of things to the American Empire. Ever since the Korean Coast Guard used violent means to kill 3 unarmed Hua Xia fishermen, and even announced that they would use cannons to attack Hua Xia's fishing boats, this little thing had never stopped. The day before Hua Xia's National Day was Hua Xia's official Martyrs' Day. On such an important and sensitive day like Hua Xia, Korea announced that the American Empire's Saad, who harbored evil intentions, would be installed at the entrance of Hua Xia's northeastern region. How could the men of the Northeast tolerate this? What would he do if he saw Koreans in the future? Stop trying to scare them and tell them to stop looking. Just use your fists and do it. Who knows, with such an awesome camera on the Saad, you might be able to peek at your wife taking a shower at home. Moreover, the Korean Ministry of National Defense even said that there was a need to deploy more Saad. If 1 set was not enough, then 2. If 2 sets were not enough, then 3. This was a public provocation. Then there was the exploding star incident that Ruan Qingxuang hated. The mobile phone exploded, and Samsung recalled it globally, but not Hua Xia. What did that mean? It stopped sales globally, but it did not include Hua Xia. Under the circumstances where there was no recall inspection, they slandered Hua Xia consumers for self-detonation to cheat compensation, saying that the people of Hua Xia were shameless. It was true that Korea had already entered a hysterical state of madness. Everyone in Korea had lost their rationality, and their anti-Chinese emotions were running high. Hua Xia was a big country and had magnanimity. In the past, when dealing with some problems, they cared too much about the big picture and were too gentlemanly. However, when Hua Xia wanted to settle things peacefully, there would definitely be a storm. Now, the Koreans had already become mad dogs. They opened their mouths and wanted to bite people. They felt that the American Empire was their biological father and did not love Japan anymore. Therefore, they showed their fangs to Hua Xia without any scruples. In the eyes of the Koreans, Hua Xia tourists were poor people. They really felt that only poor people would come to Korea to play. They felt that Hua Xia people were all country bumpkins. Only country bumpkins would come to their country to broaden their horizons. They felt that Hua Xia people were all ugly people. Only ugly people would come to their country for plastic surgery. Ruan Qingxuang and Zhua Meiyan did not suffer any difficulties in Korea. The reason was very simple. The Koreans all thought that the two of them were beautiful. Moreover, their dressing and temperament were completely above those of the Korean women. Therefore, the Koreans felt that Ruan Qingxuang and Zhua Meiyan were both Korean and could not be Hua Xia people. The Koreans felt that only Korea could have such a temperament, and Hua Xia women were all country bumpkins who did not have any temperament. This was true. Now, if an ordinary person traveled in Korea as a Hua Xia person, they would encounter a lot of supercilious eyes and all kinds of discrimination. Unless they were really a big idiot who squandered money in Korea. Because the Koreans also thought that it would be a waste if they did not earn the money of these big idiots. If they could earn the money of these big idiots by nodding and bowing, why not? Zhua Meiyan and Ruan Qingxuang did not have to pay for their own expenses in Korea. Because they represented Sky Entertainment, Korea Entertainment did not want to make no profit, so they still hoped to cooperate with Sky Entertainment. Therefore, when Zhua Meiyan and Ruan Qingxuang first arrived in Korea and said that they would not participate in any of their banquets, a president of Korea Entertainment came to Zhua Meiyan and gave her an overdraft card in Korea. Zhua Meiyan did not stand on ceremony with him. If it wasn't for some reasons, she would not have bothered to come to Korea. She did not want Korea to earn a single cent from her. Therefore, she directly took the card and used it. She used it to eat and drink in Korea. When she left, she broke it and threw it away. In any case, Korea was still unwilling to give up on her resolute decision. They still wanted to hold on to hope. However, as long as Hua Meiyan left Korea this time, she would never have any business relationship with Korea again. She would completely stop all business cooperation. Hua Meiyan would not earn money from this, and she would not let the artists promoted by the Koreans continue to earn Hua Xia's money. The self-righteous Koreans actually proposed to boycott Hua Xia's tourists. They really thought too highly of themselves. Reality was very cold. After Lotte Supermarket was attacked, Korea's entire tourism industry entered a cold winter. In the early stages of the deployment of THAAD, Korea would lose about $15 billion because of offending Hua Xia. Moreover, the continuous attacks in the future would slow down the growth of the entire Korea economy, and the annual GDP would also decrease because of this. Perhaps in the past, Hua Xia had boycotted France, the US Empire, Japan, and even Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, but the effect was not very obvious. However, it was different this time. This time, Korea was really effective. Hua Xia was the country with the largest trade surplus in Korea. It seemed to be equivalent to the sum of the US Empire, Japan, and Taiwan Island combined. The effect would definitely be more obvious than before. Of course, the self-righteous Koreans would not easily submit to Hua Xia's sanctions. This should need Hua Xia to punish them every few days to make them feel some pressure. Otherwise, they would not be obedient. Think about what the Western bastards led by the US Empire did to Hua Xia. They had jointly sanctioned Hua Xia several times, and each time, it caused a considerable blow to the economy of Hua Xia. However, the Hua Xia people survived, and later, they slowly recovered. Now, Korea would definitely think the same. As long as they survived, everything would be fine. They could still do whatever they wanted in the future. Fortunately, China was not so ruthless. If they really wanted to punish Korea to death, they could really make them cry but have no tears. To put it seriously, they could even make them beg for death. At this time, if they insisted on boycotting Korea for 3 or 5 years, they would probably lose their country and be driven into a corner. Fortunately, the people of Huaxia were kind and would leave a way out for others. Huaxia people knew that if they left a way out for themselves, it would be easier to meet them in the future. They were just afraid that the Koreans didn't know this and didn't want to give them face. If that happened, they really couldn't blame the old and young of Huaxia for being merciless. Chapter 3944. The address Su Yun gave Hua Meiyan was actually a slum area in the outskirts of Pusan. There were many similar slums around the big cities in Korea. The houses in the slums were even worse than the houses made of mud and wheat straw before the liberation of Huaxia. They were all made of rotten wooden boards and torn oil paper and cloth. Therefore, the sanitary environment was naturally very bad. There were all kinds of mosquitoes, cockroaches, rats, and everything else. The houses in the slums here in Pusan were made of rotten wood and oil paper on the hillside. Due to the small land and the large population, the space between the houses was very narrow. Many of these dilapidated houses never saw the light of day all year round. The poor in Korea lived in such houses. There was no gas, not even electricity. The winter was cold and the summer was hot. Was there any difference between them and the poor in old Kim's house next door? Obviously, there was no difference. Don't say that the poor in Korea also had televisions. The exploding Samsung was very cheap in China. Anyway, electronic products could earn a lot of money in Huaxia. Of course, it was cheap in their own country. Most of the people living in such slums made a living by picking up junk. It was normal for them to not have enough to eat and warm clothes. Life was very difficult. Of course, it was difficult. In Pusan, seafood was considered cheap. If you had a fish with some kimchi, soy sauce soup, and rice, it would cost more than 100 renminbi per person. Also, don't eat the blood tofu soup. It was fishy and disgusting. There were also the stinky fish and prawns that were pickled like kimchi. Zhuomeyan and Ruan Qingshuang followed the address. There was an unpleasant fishy smell along the way. They seemed to have passed by a market. The Koreans did not like to go home immediately after work, regardless of whether they worked overtime or not. They simply went to the seafood market to eat with their friends. They did not care about the dining environment at all. Some people who wanted to save face would say that this was the feeling they wanted. It was a kind of enjoyment to see how the lively seafood was processed and served on their table. But the people in Korea who were really rich and knew how to enjoy themselves would definitely choose to go to places like Luoyan restaurant. That kind of place was called enjoyment. Wasn't it because they didn't have money to eat here? In addition to these, there were also people who ate barbecued meat, but not many people were willing to eat so much meat. Sometimes, 2 people would only eat 1 plate. If they were not full, they would eat rice or cold noodles. Anyway, meat was too expensive, so they could not eat until they were full like Huaxia people. It seems that there are more poor people here. Ruan Qingshuang sighed with emotion when she saw the people eating in such a dirty and messy environment. Actually, it's the same everywhere. This is very normal. In Huaxia, there are more poor people without money. Zhuomeyan said, it's the same for every country. After all, there are more poor people in the world. Ruan Qingshuang nodded. However, Korea wasn't a large country. It wasn't easy for a large country to feed a few 100 million people. It was indeed pitiful for Korea to have such a small population. Now is not the time to pity them. We are almost there. Zhuomeyan pointed at a colorful area on the hillside. Even though it was night time, they could still see the mottled colors under the moonlight. It was one of the slums in Busan, Korea. However, in recent years, the Koreans had turned it into a cultural village. They even called themselves the Santorini of Korea. She had to admit that the Koreans were really narcissistic. The village was located in Gancheon-dong, Busan. Looking from afar, she could see rows of colorful houses lined up along the contour of the hillside and extending to the beach. Did they really call themselves Santorini? Santorini was an island chain formed by a group of volcanoes on the Aegean Sea. It had an irresistible charm. Even at night, it was still brightly lit and bustling with people. Santorini had a unique volcanic geology, which resulted in the unique black beach in Kamari. It also had the ruins of Akrotiri. Santorini was considered to be the most beautiful place in the world to watch the sunset. Thousands of tourists from all over the world would gather here to enjoy the afterglow of the setting sun every day. The moment the sun set, it was as if time had stopped. The sun slowly disappeared into the horizon. The town suddenly became quiet and serene, sending off the last rays of the setting sun. The beautiful scenery was intoxicating. Korea, on the other hand, seemed to be a completely fake version. A few years ago, this place was still a slum. It was a village of religious believers in Korea since the 1960s. Due to the urban transformation of Busan City, the followers of this religion and the refugees from the Korean War were moved to the mountainous area of Gancheon-dong, which was where the current Koryo Santorini was located. There were only a few thousand people living along the flat slopes of the foothills, and the poor villagers lived in temporary wooden houses. It was a poor village. Due to their different beliefs, the villagers of this slum village were alienated by the ordinary people of Busan. The infrastructure in the village was relatively poor, and the villagers did not have any skills to make a living. It was the worst slum in Busan. But just a few years ago, some sly officials in Busan, Korea, collaborated with some third-rate artists to develop a plan to turn this place into an art village called Korea Santorini. Of course, this was also after a vigorous environmental renovation, and some third-rate artists were hired to do some creative work. The former slum area turned into the colorful so-called art and culture village. Not to mention, many tourists were deceived. Many people in Huaxia were probably deceived as well. The Huaxia people were too naive. They would probably come as soon as they heard about Santorini Art Village. Many residents in this place also opened small shops and cafes. It was said that the Korean Culture, Sports and Tourism Department also transformed the empty houses in the village into some third-rate artists' creative studios or galleries. Some were even turned into restaurants and homestays. Some open spaces and roofs in the village were also turned into gardens. After the renovation, it was indeed a world of difference from the former slum area. However, compared to Santorini, it was still several levels lower. They were not on the same level at all. Only the Koreans were thick-skinned enough to put on the hat of Santorini Art Village. Zhua Meiyan and Ruan Qingshuang walked all the way up the slope. Beside the slope of more than 40 degrees were ordinary houses. The main road into the village was quite good. Various murals and sculptures were hidden in the corners. It could be said that there were surprises everywhere. There was also a small museum. Although it was only a few dozen square meters in size, it condensed the process of the change of this slum area. It also collected various old objects from the past, such as old wall clocks, antique typewriters, and replicas of the small wooden houses. There were even advertisements from the past. After passing through the winding paths between the houses, the two went up to the rooftop. They could see everything in the distance. The colorful houses were like small squares, arranged along the mountain like Lego blocks. Because it was night, it was not very beautiful. It was estimated that during the day, the colors would be more vivid, and perhaps it would be more beautiful. The house numbers here are too messy. The address Su Yun gave us is near here. Zhua Meiyan said, "Let's find it slowly." Because there were tourists here at night, there were basic streetlights, so it would not affect the two of them to find the way. After walking for a while, Zhua Meiyan felt tired. When she saw a coffee shop, she asked Ruan Qingshuang to have a cup of coffee to refresh herself. However, when they walked to the door of the coffee shop, Ruan Qingshuang pointed at the house number. It was actually the address Su Yun gave them. "If I knew it was here, I would have come here directly to drink." Zhua Meiyan rolled her eyes helplessly. There seemed to be some customers drinking coffee inside. Ruan Qingshuang said. Zhua Meiyan shook her head. "It's okay. We are not in a hurry anyway. Let's go in and drink first. When the other customers leave, we will talk about our business." Ruan Qingshuang nodded in agreement. No matter what, it was not good to disturb the other tourists who came here. No matter where these tourists came from, they spent money to have fun. It would be a sin if they disturbed them. Chapter 39:45. Ruan Qingshuang and Zhua Meiyan walked into the cafe. There were about a dozen customers inside. Listening to their conversation, they were all Koreans. The two of them found a corner and sat down. Zhua Meiyan ordered 2 cups of coffee in Korean. Then, they quietly tasted the coffee and waited for the time to come. In fact, Koreans really liked drinking coffee. Coffee would accompany them for almost the entire day. Many Koreans would drink a cup of coffee when they went to work in the morning. They would also drink a cup of coffee when they had a meeting in the morning. They would also drink a cup of coffee when they had a lunch. They would also drink a cup of coffee when they had a break in the afternoon. They would also drink a cup of coffee when they met with friends. This should be called friendship coffee, right? Therefore, Koreans who loved drinking coffee would drink at least 5 cups of coffee a day on average. Anyway, they basically drank instant coffee, so it didn't cost much at all. Not to mention other things, such a small country with a population of 50 million actually ranked 11th in the world in coffee consumption. Of course, the mentality of many Koreans was actually the same as some people who like to show off in Hwaseong. They began to drink freshly brewed coffee as if drinking freshly brewed coffee was a type of lifestyle or even a symbol of taste in life. It could be seen that Koreans were actually very vain. How could a country where everyone, regardless of gender, not be vain? They don't have to worry about not being able to sleep when they drink coffee at night. Ruan Qingshuang said. If it wasn't because she wanted to wake up, Ruan Qingshuang would definitely not drink coffee at night. It was too easy to lose sleep. Moreover, this cafe had many customers at night. I don't have time during the day, so I came out to have some fun at night. Zhua Meiyan said, Anyway, people are sleeping later and later. There are many people who are preparing to go to bed in the early morning. Ruan Qingxuang nodded. It was indeed so. The pressure of modern society is causing adults to sleep later and later. Korean society is very stressful, so they all sleep late. It's good to drink a cup of coffee to wake up. Zhua Meiyan smiled. Modern society was very stressful, and people's work and life were very busy. People were sleeping later and later. However, sleeping late would not only decrease the quality of one's sleep, but it would also cause one to eat poorly and exercise less. In any case, there was no benefit to it. In the past, when I woke up in the morning, I would feel like I was fully charged. But now, I can't feel it anymore. Ruan Qingxuang shook her head helplessly. It's because you don't get enough sleep after coming to Sky Entertainment Group, so you get tired easily. Zhua Meiyan said, also, do you feel that you're not willing to sleep even if you have nothing to do? You're going to sleep later and later? How do you know? Ruan Qingxuang was stunned. It's really like this. I feel this way now. It seems that you also have sleep procrastination. Zhua Meiyan said helplessly, when I started running Sky Entertainment Group, I was already suffering from sleep procrastination. It can't be helped. There are too many things on my mind. Even if we think we're completely fine, that's not the case. The reason we can't sleep is because there are too many things on our minds and we don't have enough time to deal with them. Ruan Qingxuang said, I think we need to eat melatonin. If we don't sleep well, our bodies will definitely be sub-healthy. That's how society is now. More than 60% of people don't have a regular schedule. More than 80% of people rely on their sleeping environment. More than 90% of people can't leave their phones, tablets, or TV before going to bed. At the very least, they need to listen to music. Zhua Meiyan smiled bitterly. If we can sleep well, then we're the lucky 5%. It's worth opening a bottle of red wine to celebrate. Ruan Qingxuang couldn't help but laugh. Because this was a very scary fact. Indeed, being able to sleep well in this day and age was a kind of luck. Although the two of them spoke very softly, some of the surrounding guests could still hear that they were speaking Chinese, not Korean. At this moment, some of the admiring and envious gazes began to turn into disdain. Some even looked at them with disgust. Some people even raised their voices and said some bad things about Hua Xia, as well as some disdainful words about Hua Xia. These words seemed to be deliberately spoken for Ruan Qingxuang and Zhua Meiyan to hear. After hearing that person's words, Ruan Qingxuang felt a bit uncomfortable. I really don't understand. Logically speaking, Koreans shouldn't feel superior to Hua Xia, right? Moreover, no matter how you look at it, Chinese people shouldn't worship Koreans, right? But look at these Koreans. They're really full of a sense of superiority. They're so arrogant and domineering. When Zhua Meiyan heard Ruan Qingxuang's words, she only smiled and didn't say anything. What's even more infuriating is that there really are Hua Xia people who think they're wretched. They're actually willing to chase and worship Koreans. Where does Koreans get their sense of superiority from? Ruan Qingxuang really couldn't understand. It can't be helped. They're just a bunch of people who drink shoddy liquor and shout "Long live Korea." Zhua Meiyan was used to this. No matter how high or low their social status is, they're all like this. And haven't you noticed that Koreans can't stop talking about dogs? Cursing is a very common catchphrase. It's everywhere. Ruan Qingxuang vigorously nodded. When she was in Korea Entertainment, if her subordinates did something wrong, the boss would directly use words like, "fuck your mother," and scold them. She would even reach out and slap their heads or kick them. Hua Xia people really have to be prepared to be insulted and discriminated against. When I first came to Korea, I was often asked stupid questions. People actually asked me if there were apples in Hua Xia, if I could eat enough in Hua Xia, if I've watched TV, if I've never seen a mobile phone, and even stupid questions like if there was rice. Zhua Meiyan shrugged. No way. Ruan Qingxuang's jaw almost dropped. Are they all idiots? Many Koreans are really idiots. Some people even said that their food culture is the most representative of Asia. At that time, I really burst out laughing. Other than eating kimchi, they only eat some fatty pork and chicken. They can't even bear to eat ribs often. Beef is something that only the nobles in Korea can enjoy. Zhua Meiyan said as she looked at the Koreans who were looking at her with disdain. Do you know why they ask those childish questions? Zhua Meiyan continued. Ruan Qingshuang shook her head. Zhua Meiyan smiled slightly and looked at the Koreans who were looking at them with disdain. She said word by word, because they think Koreans are very powerful if they can afford apples, so they think apples are very powerful. Huaxia people may not be able to afford them. If the Koreans know that Huaxia has so many fruits to eat, they will probably be scared to death. Forget it, you can't blame them. After all, many Koreans have never even seen lychee before, Ruan Qingshuang said. Zhua Meiyan nodded and said, It's true. Many Koreans have never seen lychee before, so they can't afford it. At this time, a few Americans suddenly came in. They seemed to be the American soldiers stationed in Korea. As soon as these guys came in, they arrogantly said something in English. The Koreans present all lowered their heads dejectedly, looking completely afraid. Do you see that? The Koreans are very servile. After all, they were enslaved by Huaxia for thousands of years, and then by Japan. Now it's the Americans' turn. That's why they are so scared when they see the Americans. Zhua Meiyan smiled. That's true. Ruan Qingshuang looked at the Koreans and felt sorry for them. In particular, an American soldier patted a couple's seat, indicating that they wanted to sit there. The couple really got up and left dejectedly. Several American soldiers laughed out loud. As the saying goes, the more inferior a person is, the more arrogant he looks, and the more self-righteous he is. Zhua Meiyan said, These words are perfect for the Goryeo Bangzi. The American soldiers talked louder and louder. Some Koreans quietly got up and left the cafe. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.